Hi, Charles, SirBookSage here. Welcome to another of my Sunday live streams. Today I'm going to... Oh, hold on a minute. I have my browser open. Let me close that real quick. That's distracting. Hi, Charles SirBookSage here. I am continuing my way through... Good Lord, one of these times I'll start a live stream properly. I'm continuing my way through Season 2 of The Wheel of Time. Today I'm going to be talking about Episode 7, Daes Dae'mar, or otherwise known as the continuing absolute utter obliteration of the character of Siuan Sanche. What an absolutely horrid version of Siuan Sanche we got in this episode. I do want to say this. There were some good things in this episode. Unfortunately, those were few and far between. There weren't many. This was easily, without a doubt, the worst episode of the season for me. One of the worst episodes of this TV series, unfortunately. And to have it be a penultimate episode, its job is to set up the finale. I guess it did that in that sense. We basically stopped everyone just turning their wheels and just got them all to follow pretty much, so we can actually have something happen in this TV show. But I do want to dive into the specifics of this episode, and I actually want to spend a little bit of time going over Rand's meeting with the Amyrlin in the book and how that goes down, and then go over how it happened in this TV show. Because outside of the very first minute of their meeting, when he first walks in and he says he's ready, you know, kind of thing. That little scene before we cut away, that was generally from the book, for the most part, just generally recognizable. When they came back to it, finally, for the rest of the scene to play out, I mean, that was just very little of that resembled what happened in the book. So I just kind of want to go over all of this today. Okay. Let's start, however, with the cold open of the show. Now, when we knew we were going to have a flashback scene with Moiraine and Siuan Sanche this season, and those of us who've read the books, we figured that's probably going to be Keeper Gitara and her foretelling the moment the dragon is reborn, which is how the show opens. And I like that here. This sort of mirrors the cold open of Episode 7 of Season 1. That episode began with the whole blood snow scene, where Tigraine, as a maiden of the spear, is pregnant and she's fighting, gives birth to Rand and dies. And we get that sort of scenes from that, like interspersed while Gitara is having this sort of foretelling vision of the dragon being reborn. We see clips of that, like interspliced with Gitara giving her foretelling here to Moiraine and Siuan. Now, in this flashback, Moiraine and Siuan are accepted. They haven't been raised to the full shawl yet, but they're close to it. So they're coming to meet what they believe is with the Amyrlin Seat, you know, one of their sort of pre-being raised to an Aes Sedai test meeting. And when they get there, the Keeper, Gitara, is there. And in this scene, however, we see Moiraine and Siuan Sanche. They're basically making their plans for the future. It's a cute little flashback scene of them 20 years earlier, before this moment you're about to see happen and changed everything, changed the whole course of both of their lives. So now it is a little odd if you stop and think and realize Moiraine is meant to be like 60 years old in that scene. So it just is a little weird that she's acting like someone who's like 18 or 19 years old. But again, a minor thing. But it's a cute little scene, just reestablishing this relationship, reminding the audience of this relationship they had when they were younger, which is a very different relationship from in the books. In the books, there's, I think, a brief sort of mention of pillow talk, which can be interpreted however anyone wants. I think in the prequel book, A New Spring. But there's no overt, like, sexual relationship between these two in the books at all. This is something that was created for the TV show. And there are some plot things that happen later that I really don't see that the show is going to do. Because by making this change to these two characters, which is a very significant change to who they are, it tells me they're going to be eliminating certain things that come later. But you never know, you know. But anyway, it's a cute little scene. They come into the chamber. Guitar is there. Guitar is blind in this version of the show. I don't recall her being blind in the book. Again, we only see this mainly. Moiraine is recounting this to Rand in the book when Rand is meeting with the Amyrlin Seat. I can't remember if we see this sort of play out live in the New Spring. I haven't read the New Spring in a long time, so I'm not sure. But in book 2, Moiraine is actually telling this to Rand. But here in the show, it's a flashback. And they come into the room, and Moiraine and Siuan are telling Katara that the Aiel have turned around, and they're leaving. They're going back across the spine of the world and going back to the desert. And it's great news. And then Katara's like, drops this cup, and she has this sort of foretelling. And I have to say, this was such a disappointing scene. What a letdown. This is one of the, like, maybe 5 or 6 things from book 2 that I was really looking forward to the most, seeing in this season. And this scene just fell flat for me. It really was, and it's a combination of a couple of things. And I'm putting this on the director for giving the actress this sort of play this so casual and so calm, because it didn't come across that way, the way Moiraine was retelling it in book 2. And while I like the splicing between the Blood Snow scene from the first season and as she's talking here, like these two happening at the same time, that was very well done from an editing standpoint. But overall, the scene fell flat. And one of the reasons why it doesn't hit the way it does in the books is because they changed some of what Katara says for the TV show. They add some things that she doesn't say in the books, which really takes away the moment of her actual just dropping dead. It just diffuses the power of that moment. And then the stuff she does say that's from the books, they had to rewrite, had to reword because of this which one is the dragon mystery they created in season 1. By the show positing that the dragon could be a man, could be a woman, nobody knows. That's, again, a significant change from the book. In the book, the Dragon Reborn is meant to be Lews Therin come again, so everyone understands the Dragon Reborn is going to be a man. So all the prophecies and things about the dragon are written from that perspective. Even Katara's foretelling of the dragon being reborn, she's seeing this happening, and she's recounting it from that perspective, that it's Lews Therin has come again, kind of thing. But because they had this mystery in season 1, whether they wanted to just create a water cooler buzz, or they're really significantly changing the foundational core aspects of this story and lore, and there maybe different things are going to happen at the end of this story in the show. Different people other than Rand might get to do some of the things Rand does in the books. Who knows? I don't know if the show's ever going to make it that far. Part of me wants it to, just because, you know, it's fantasy and I want to see a fantasy story get to tell its whole story. Part of me is like, it's going to need to improve significantly from this episode if they have any chance of getting anywhere to the end of this whole story. But I want to read what Katara says here in the book and then read what they have her say in this scene. And you'll see the difference between the two. So here's how it's recounted by Moiraine in the book. Katara says, "He is born again. I feel him. The dragon takes his first breath on the slope of Dragonmount. He's coming. He's coming. Light help us. Light help us all. Light help the world. He lies in the snow and cries like the thunder. He burns like the sun." And then she drops stone cold dead on the spot. Now, forgive my horrible retelling of that, and this is what Katara says in the show. And the words are changed slightly because nothing can be written in a way where it could have ever been a man, because it's a mystery. It just happens to be a man in the TV show, the way this TV show is doing it. So in the show, she says, the dragon is born again. I feel it. It's happening now. The baby lies in the snow and cries like the thunder. It burns like the sun. And then she adds, tell no one, my sisters. You must find the dragon reborn and prepare the world to follow. And then she dies, like kind of casually. So the whole last part of it, tell no one, like she has time to give instructions before dying. Where in the book, the foretelling is so powerful, it just burns the life out of her, and she just drops like a rock as soon as those last words come out of her mouth. And the big difference here, because they had to strip out the he, him, and all that, and just have it be so generic, because they added this dragon, could be a man or a woman sort of mystery, there's no emotional attachment to an it. It doesn't mean anything. Like, just he is coming, or she is coming. She burns like the sun. There's, in a human instinctual level, there's an emotional attachment to that, feeling that, seeing that, imagining that. But it's coming. It doesn't mean anything at all. There's no emotional attachment there. And because they had to strip this kind of framing out, because of the way they decided to do that sort of mystery, it strips out the emotional weight of the scene. Because, I feel it. It's happening. There's no emotion. There's no visceral gut punch to it, the way it is in the book. And had the dragon been a woman in the book, the same exact scene written, she is born again, I feel her. The dragon takes her first breath. It still has the same deep gut punch. But this stripped out language where it's just an it instead, it doesn't work, and it made the scene just fall flat on its face. And hey, Stan, I got to remember to look at StreamYard over here. Katara doesn't seem to have any other function than to make her prediction and die. They should have given her a few seconds to be a normal person before. And yeah, very true. I mean, she does, that's all she is here. I can't remember again. It's been so long since I read New Spring to remember if she's present in that book in any way. But that's something I'm probably going to reread after season 2 is over. I've been rereading parts of book 2. I went and reread the whole Rand meeting the Amyrlin, and basically the scene leading right up to that, and that scene after watching this episode to remind myself of what that was supposed to be. But overall, yeah, just between the delivery the actress was given, the way she was told to deliver the lines clearly, it was just passionless. And changing the language to just so generic to an it just strips any emotional meaning or connection out of it. So, very disappointing. There's about 5 or 6 scenes from this second book, or book 2 and book 3, that I expect to see in this TV show. One of them, Matt with his quarterstaff, didn't happen. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. Supposedly it's going to happen somehow in some way in this TV show at some point later, which means it's not going to be the same scene because it's going to happen for a completely different reason, and the context is going to be entirely different, and it will lose the point of it that it has in the books. So that doesn't even happen. This is the next one. This flashback, this foretelling, just fell flat. The third one is Rand meeting the Amyrlin. And that whole scene, the scene that precedes it, with the Amyrlin Moiraine talking to Varen, and Varen dropping some big, like, nuclear bombs in the room, revealing things she's figured out. And I will have a lot to say about that whole, what happened in the book, the setup to her meeting Rand, and then the meeting with Rand, and then the quick post discussion, and then the TV show. So, Stan, I just jumped on live. How did you feel about Moiraine and Siuan? This is one of the things that I was not a fan of in this show, in this episode in particular. They're being forced to do things with these characters, basically creating story and drama that does not exist in the books, because they decided to make them basically lovers in this TV show, which, like I said, they're really not in the books. But because they have that and they're putting it front and center, they have to then create a fake rift that causes them to kind of separate and go their own ways, I guess, at this point. And we see a lot of that happen in this TV show, and they just wrecked the character of Siuan Sanche in this episode. The Siuan Sanche you see in this episode 7, this is not Siuan Sanche in the books. This is barely recognizable when it comes to her character in the books. And she does this, what she does at the end of this episode is, quite frankly, is a straight up act of evil that would get her deposed and stilled on the spot if anyone else witnessed that. And I did just talk about young Moiraine and Siuan. Like I was saying, the show has changed from the books, and they've made their sort of friendship like an overtly sexual one here in the books, in the TV show, which is a significant change to who they are. And like I said, is going to make some things that come later, not really anything they're going to do in this TV show. So let's just say there's a certain general that should be coming soon, that who knows if he's even going to appear in this TV show. That remains to be seen. But like I said, overall, just a very disappointing Dragon Reborn prophecy moment. The Katara foretelling scene. Just what a shame, because that could have been so much better. But again, these are unforced errors. The show's doing it to itself because of changes they've made to like some of the foundational lore in the books. So let's get on to Rand meeting the Amyrlin Seat. And I want to set this up first by walking you through, for those of you watching this who haven't read these books, how this plays out in Book 2. Because there's a setup scene that happens right before Rand meets the Amyrlin, and then there's that scene. And I want to kind of go over both of these, because the first scene is with the Amyrlin and Moiraine and Verin Sedai. And it's one of the most important scenes in not only in this book, but in these early books, quite frankly. This conversation that Verin has in Fal Dara with Siuan Sanche and Moiraine. So I want to get into that now, walk you through that scene, and then Rand's meeting with the Amyrlin in the book, and then we'll talk about this barely recognizable version of it in the TV show. Okay, in Book 2, they're in Fal Dara. This is where the Amyrlin comes. Everyone's in Fal Dara at the start of Book 2, which was Lord Agelmar's city that we saw at the end of Season 1. And everyone's still there, basically recuperating from the Eye of the World and the Trolloc attack and all this stuff. Padan Fain is locked in a prison cell in the dungeons of the city because he had climbed over the wall in Book 1 and they caught him and locked him up because he was just crazy. So Trollocs and Myrddraal break in, they break Padan Fain out, they murder a lot of Shan-Chan guards, and they steal the Horn of Valair and the Mat's Shadow Logoth dagger, and they take off. So the Shienarans are going to be putting together a group of soldiers, captained by Ingtar, who we've met in this TV show. Ingtar and Uno are going to be, and a group of Shienarans are going to chase after them. Mat Cauthon wants to go with them because he needs to get that dagger back, or he's going to die. And this scene here that is the setup to Rand coming and meeting the Amyrlin in the book, it opens up with basically an unconscious Mat being like carried out of the room, taken to like a room where he can recuperate. Because the Amyrlin had linked together with a bunch of Aes Sedai and healed him as much as he could be healed without the dagger being present. Because in the TV show, Mat is still bound to the Shadow Logoth dagger. When Moiraine sort of did healing in Season 1, that sort of presented it as that separated him from the dagger. But in the books, her healing just gives him temporary relief. And the same goes here in this scene, where Moiraine was able to give temporary relief in Book 1 because the dagger has such a stronger hold on Mat. At this point, it takes the Amyrlin and a group of Aes Sedai linked together, channeling their powers to like basically keep Mat alive in the book, because the dagger's been stolen and he's dying without the dagger in his presence. So what they do is they basically buy him a few months in this scene, and he's carted out, and everyone leaves the room except for the Amyrlin and Moiraine and Verin. And Verin Sedai is here, and Verin is like wants to talk to them. She's curious about this dagger, because one of the things about the Brown Aja is the Brown Aja their heads are buried in books. that's how they spend their time. They're always combing through, like think of Samwell Tarly in Game of Thrones. If Samwell Tarly were a woman and he was an Aes Sedai, he'd be a brown sister. He'd be part of the brown Asha. And so Verin is fascinated with this Shadow Logos dagger, and she hopes it can be found and recovered. And she's curious about it because it corrupts anyone who has it. And then that person and the dagger's presence corrupts anyone around them. And then do they then corrupt more people once they become corrupted? And does this spread out? And if you had a year, how many people, how much of the continent would be corrupted and evil or dead just from this dagger being loose on the world? And to her, it's an interesting puzzle. Like, she's just fascinated, like wishing she could watch it happen kind of thing, which is just giving you an indication of what the brown Ajah's are like. And Verin is a really cool character in the books, and she plays a big role in book 2, The Great Hunt. She's been completely wasted in this season. I love the actress who they cast to play her. The Verin that they're writing is nothing at all like Verin's character in the books. She's very different in the books. Like I said, she's always like going off on these tangents, pondering and puzzling out how things might play out, and what if I could study this, and wouldn't it be fascinating if this happened in this way, and just imagine if we could witness this in person and just document it all. And that's kind of where her brain is, or at least how she presents where her brain is to people. And Verin in the TV show, she's Sherlock Holmes. So they give a very different personality to Verin. But again, the actress I'm a big fan of, so I just hope TV Verin gets to do more what book Verin does. Because she's here in these Valdara scenes, and then Verin pops up later in the book on the road and finds her way, like catches up to Ingtar and Perrin and Mat and them while they're chasing the horn and the dagger. And Verin's with them the rest of the way. So she's she's the main Aes Sedai in book 2, whereas Moiraine was the main Aes Sedai in book 1. Because Moiraine is off doing other things here. But in this scene, Verin's pondering this, and Moiraine has to admit to her that, well, Mat, for some reason, is the only one who can retrieve this dagger without it harming him or anyone else around him. So he's gonna, once he's healthy enough, he's gonna have to go after the dagger. And the Amyrlin kind of agrees, and they're just trying to get Verin out of the room. And Verin is like, well, I thought you might want to hear what was written on the dungeon walls, because the Trollocs apparently scrawled in human blood a bunch of stuff on the walls. And Verin recorded it, wrote it all down, and then had people from the castle just scrub the walls clean to get rid of it. But there's an interesting thing here, and she says that most of what was written is the usual blasphemy and boasting. Trollocs seem to know little else. But there was one part, she says, it was written in a better hand, like an educated dark friend, or even a Myrddraal, perhaps. And she says, it could be only taunting, yet it has the form of poetry or song and the sound of prophecy. We know little of prophecies from the Shadow Mother. So the Amyrlin is like, okay, read it to me, please. And this is where the whole, the Daughter of the Night prophecy thing comes in. In the TV show, it's Bail Doman gives Moiraine this sort of parchment that has this sort of Daughter of the Night poem on it, which then Lan takes from Moiraine, and then Alana and her waters steal from Lan, and then we get that whole Days of Our Lives soap opera drama nonsense that they wasted time on earlier in the season. Because the waters apparently in the show don't actually fight, they just sit around and gossip. So, for whatever reason. But this scene in the book, we get the entire sort of poem, and it was scrawled in blood on the wall where they had broken Pat and Fane out. And I want to kind of just quickly go through this, just to give you an idea of how much more was in that poem that this TV show didn't bother to tell us. So I just want to cover it here, because it's a few very interesting things here that tie into some of it to this plot of this book, and some of it to the overarching plot of the story. And it sets up some important things that are going to come in particularly in the next few books. So I want to just go through it real quick. So this is what Verin had written down. It's Daughter of the Night, she walks again. The ancient war she yet fights. Her new lover she seeks. Who shall serve her and die, yet serve still? Who shall stand against her coming? The shining walls shall kneel, and then blood feeds blood, blood calls blood, blood is, blood was, and blood shall ever be. So now, that's obviously Lanfear. Her new lover seems to be, I take it to be a reference to the dragon being reborn again, because that's who Lanfear was in love with the first time around. The shining walls is a reference to the White Tower. Like, the Lanfear will bring the White Tower to its knees. And then we get to the second verse that was written, which is really interesting as well. And it says, the man who channels stands alone. He gives his friends for sacrifice. 2 roads before him, one to death beyond dying, one to life eternal. Which will he choose? Which will he choose? What hand shelters? What hand slays? And then blood feeds blood, blood calls blood, yada, yada, yada. And this, obviously, the man who channels, clearly seems to be talking about Rand, even though it's not mentioning Rand, obviously, by name. How would it know? Nor is it mentioning the Dragon Reborn by name, but you can tell that that's sort of the implication here. So this is the Dark Friends letting them know that they know the dragon's been reborn, in a sense. And then we get a really interesting part, which, the next verse. Luke came to the mountains of doom. Isam waited in the high passes. The hunt is now begun. The shadow's hounds now course and kill. One did live, one did die, but both are. And Luke is a reference to Tigraine Damodred's brother, Luke, who is Rand's uncle, because Tigraine Damodred, who was the original daughter heir, who just disappeared one day. She went into the Threefold Land, became a maiden of the spear, and then gave birth to Rand on the slopes of Dragonmount. This was her brother, and he went into the Blight and was lost in the Blight. And Isam is related to Lan, Alan Mandragoran. I think Isam is meant to be Lan's half-brother, if I remember. And this infers that Isam is actually still alive somewhere. And Moiraine is like in her head, it's like, I'm not telling Lan this while we're anywhere near the Blight, because I know that idiot will just run in there hunting for his half-brother. And implying not in a great to see you again, but in a very bad, somebody's going to die in that kind of confrontation. You just kind of get that hint. But why in the world would this prophecy written in blood name drop a Rand al'Thor relative and an Alan Mandragon relative in this passage? Really, really interesting. Now, this is setting up things that are coming for later on. Really cool stuff, actually, that play out throughout this book in a very unexpected way, because even though this is related to Rand and Lan, like I kind of just Freudian slipped that Perrin is the one who starts actually end up dealing with the ramifications of this little part here. Anyway, and then it says the time of change has come, and then blood feeds blood, blood calls blood. And then we get to the final verse. And I'm going through all this for a reason. This is the final verse. The watchers wait on Toman's head. The seed of the hammer burns the ancient tree. Death shall sow and summer burn before the great Lord comes. Death shall reap and bodies fail before the great Lord comes. And the seed slays ancient wrong before the great Lord comes. Now the great Lord comes, now the great Lord comes. Blood feeds blood, blood calls blood, blood is, and blood was, and blood shall ever be. Now the great Lord comes. And that's what was written on the wall. And this is talking about really the Seanchan, because the seed of the hammer is talking about the children, the descendants of Arthur Hawkwing. Arthur Hawkwing, you've probably heard name dropped in this TV series a few times. And he is this like great hero, I think maybe from the Age of Legends. I'm not sure how far back it was. He has founded this whole big kingdom that fell apart after his death. And he had sent 2 of his sons with a big chunk of his army to sail across the, I think it's the Ameth Ocean, to basically the other side of the world. And no one really knows what happened to them. And some people believe that they got there and founded a whole new like empire there, and they're going to come again. They're going to return and take back what was their father's and what their birthright. And this is talking about that. And there are this group of people known as the Watchers who live on Tolman's Head out by Falm. And they've been sort of a little cult or sect that's been there for like 1,000 years, just looking westward out into the ocean, waiting for Arthur's children to return, kind of thing. And this is setting up the Seanchan, because the Seanchan are the descendants of that empire that Arthur Hawkwing's son founds when he gets there. So, and then they are coming back to claim what, in their sense, is their birthright. This whole continent, that belongs to them. They're the descendants of Arthur. This is their land. They have, by rights, they can just take whatever they want. This is kind of how the Seanchan view things, in a sense. And so we have this. This sets up Lanfear either has been freed or they want you to believe she's freed. This is talking about that the dragon has been reborn, even though it's not directly saying it. It's hinting at the connections to where Rand comes from, the connections to not just Manetheren, but Malkier and the Blight and all this stuff, and that the ancient enemy, the ancient people, are returning. So all this stuff is all like coming to a head. And then they basically start kind of discussing and debating what each part of this prophecy means. And, you know, they're all like, okay, it's interesting to Moiraine and the Amyrlin as well, but they want to get Verin out of the room so they can actually have a conversation about all this stuff. And then a funny thing happens. Verin drops the first of her nuclear bombs in this scene, where they are talking about all these different things and the different parts of it. And then Verin goes, and of course, Verin said calmly, the man who channels must be one of the 3 young men traveling with you, Moiraine. And she just like calmly looks at Moiraine to see Moiraine's response. And Moiraine is like, in the book, she's shocked, and she just reaches and grabs Sidon, the one power. And then the Amyrlin does the same. And Moiraine immediately realizes the mistake, that, yeah, there's no way she can deny it now, because that would not have been a reaction if that wasn't true. And Verin sort of got this little hint of, like, this look of satisfaction on her face. Like, I thought so. And I knew you were, Moiraine, that you weren't doing this alone. I just didn't know who was helping you. But now I realize it's, the Amyrlin, which isn't surprising. She's your girlhood friend. And they're trying to, like, figure out, okay, like, in Moiraine's mind is like, even though she doesn't explicitly think it, you can tell Moiraine is like, do I have to kill this woman? This is not, we're not supposed to do that, but, you can tell there's a part of her wondering if they're going to have to go there. And they ask her, it's like, well, why are you telling us? Why aren't you telling these sisters? Why aren't you telling the Reds? That's who you should be telling if you think there's a man who can channel. And Verin has like this sort of startled look on her face, like, oh, it never occurred to her to tell the Reds, because she's like, we have a man who can channel. I mean, when am I ever going to have this opportunity again to study a man, to watch him descend into madness in real time? We never have this opportunity, because whenever we do find someone, the Reds usually gentle him. We're never given the time to just see how it works, how it plays out, how long does it take? And she's saying things like, can he still function with his body rotting around him, and for how long? And if he's gentled, we will never get any of these answers. So she's kind of presenting it from the presentation of a Brown Aja and how a Brown Aja would look at it. It's just, this is a unique case study that will never come again. So why would I ever want him to be gentled? Why would I tell the people who are just going to snip him and that's it? And then she drops her second bomb, because they're like telling her, you can't tell anybody this. And she goes, if he's watched and guided, we should be able to keep some record with reasonable safety, for a time at least. And she says, and 2, there is a Carathan cycle. I assume, Mother, that he is the Dragon Reborn. I cannot believe you would do this, leave walking a man who can channel, unless he is the dragon. And this is when they realize just how much Varen has figured out. And the Amyrlin's, all right, sit down, let's have a chat. Like, what do you know? How long have you known it? And how did you find out? And Varen is like, well, about 20 years ago, and then it trails off, and the scene ends there. And trying to remember which keyboard command mutes the mic for a moment so I can clear my throat. So, this is the setup scene that precedes Rand coming to meet the Amyrlin. And this scene explains why, when he meets the Amyrlin, Moiraine and Varen are both in the room in that scene in the books. And again, this is one of the most important chapters in this entire book. One of the most important chapters in this early part of the story. Of just, and a really, it's a great setup for Varen to die. And for many reasons, some of which I do not want to spoil for those of you watching this who haven't read these books. It's just a great, great setup. And there are things that I see now coming back and doing rereads in this scene that, you know, I didn't catch the first time around. But it's such a good scene. And this just shows you an indication of, yes, they touched briefly on Varen kind of knowing this in this season, but it was just a momentary in-passing thing. Again, even when they're dropping in little book things in this TV show, they're doing them in ways that just take all the power of these moments away from them. The power that they have when they're discovered or presented in the books. You know, it's just, oh, you need to know this. So, oh, you need to know that. So, but the way it plays out in the books, there's so much more emphasis and impact to it. And yes, this is one of the challenges of taking 1,000-page books and trying to tell them in 8-episode seasons, especially when you're trying to do things from multiple books per season. And again, this is not an easy job, and I do not envy the people trying to translate these books into a coherent TV script. I just wish they had people who were better at it than they have at the moment. Though they generally were better at it this season than last season, up until this episode. I think this episode was a humongous failure on so many levels in terms of how they handled some important moments. So that's just the setup. And, you know, in the TV show, Varen has a brief conversation with, I think, Moiraine, lets her know she knows that the dragon is back. But again, it's just so, like, kind of in passing, and then Varen sleuthing in the White Tower. And I think she's here now in Carrion in the TV show. Like, everyone sort of arrived that you've met at some point is in Carrion now, except for those who are in Falm already. Okay, so now let's get to Rand meeting the Amyrlin in the book. We have Rand al'Thor runs into Lan. And Lan is giving him guidance on how to act in front of the Amyrlin. And Lan actually takes him and dresses him. Like, he gives him a coat to wear. And let's see. And he's like, Lan is looking at what Rand is wearing. He's like, you can't go dressed like that. Out of your shirt, brush your hair. And he jerks open the wardrobe and pulls out clothes, and he dresses Rand. And in the show, they have him put on Lan puts on a coat, puts a coat on Rand, and that's about it. But, and Rand is like, just wants to run away at this point in the books. He just wants to get the hell out of there. It's like, can't you just let me out the back door? And it's like, no one, even someone who wants to kill her, no one refuses a invite by the Amyrlin. And he gives Rand a silk shirt, and he gives them this fancy jacket, and he ties, I'm trying to look it up here, and he ties this sort of golden sort of thread thing and this complicated knot on his shoulder, and he pins a red eagle, the eagle of Benethrin, on it. And so he's got him ready. And he's giving him a flow of instructions on how to stand, what to say, who to say it to, what not to say. If she does this, you do this. All these things. And there's things like, but why all of this? What does it mean? Why do I put my hand over my heart if the Amyrlin Seat stands up? Why refuse anything but water? Not that I want to eat a meal with her. Then dribble some on the floor and say, the land thirsts. And if she asks how old I am, why tell her how long it has been since I was given the sword? It's like, I don't understand half of what you're telling me. And he's like, 3 drops, sheep herder. Don't pour it. You sprinkle 3 drops only. You can understand later, as long as you remember now. And he just wants Rand to be ready. And, Manetheren he's a Malkyr. He's the son of Malkyr. Malkyr's gone. Rand is, in his eyes, the son of Manetheren. Manetheren's gone. And we're the only people left to do who we came from proud. So he wants Rand to walk in there like a man. And he says, there's one rule above all others for being a man. Whatever comes, face it on your feet. And he says something like that in this scene in the show when he's preparing Rand. He does say, whatever comes, face it on your feet. But he takes him there. He brings them all the way. They're in the woman's quarters. They're going through all the way to the doors where the Amyrlin actually is. And Lan is expecting to go in as well because he knows Moiraine is in there. And Lan is told to stay outside. And as he's walking in, Lan kind of whispers, Taishar Manetheren, to just remember, who you are. Stand on your feet. And then they have a meeting. And Rand walks in, and this is the book scene. And he walks into the room. He quickly drops to one knee, left hand on sword hilt, right fist pressed to the patterned rug, and bows his head. As you have summoned me, mother, so I have come. I stand ready. And he lifts his head to see her eyebrows rise. And she's like, do you now, boy, sounding almost amused. And she says, stand up and let me have a look at you. And he straightens up, tries to keep relaxed. And he sees 3 Aes Sedai, and he's like, how many does it take to gentle a man? And so, again, he kind of knows who he is, even though he's not ready to accept it in the books at this point. But he's naturally now very nervous around the Aes Sedai. Especially when he knows Moiraine at least knows what they believe he is. And she's like, sit, boy. This will not be short, I fear. And he says, thank you, mother. By your leave, mother, I will stand. The watch is not done. And the Amyrlin's exasperated, and she turns to Moiraine. Have you let Lan at him, daughter? This will be difficult enough without him picking up waterways. And this is when you start realizing what things Lan has taught him. And they look at him, and the Amyrlin's like, this sword, it appears to be a heron-marked blade. How did he come by that, Moiraine? And this is where Moiraine launches into Tam Althor's history, and some of which Rand didn't know at all. He got a little idea of it when Tam was delirious from the Trolloc venom when they were attacked on Beltane at the opening of the first book. And but Moiraine says Tam left the Two Rivers as a boy. He joined the army of Ilion, served in the White Cloak War and the last 2 wars with Tyr, and he rose to be a blade master and second captain of the Companions, which were those soldiers you saw in the Blood Snow scene in the cold open of season 1, episode 7. Those sort of soldiers with that more fancier armor, those were known as the Companions. They're the special forces of knights, if you will. Tam was a captain of them. And after the Aiel War, Tam returned to the Two Rivers with a wife from Caemlyn and an infant boy. And she says, it would have saved much had I known this earlier, but I know it now. And Rand is a bit startled, and he, and the Amyrlin's like, can you test his sword to see if it's authentic Varen? And there are tests, then take it and test it. And Rand is like, no one's taking my sword. This is my father's sword. And the Amyrlin's like, you realize the Amyrlin's been testing him. It's like, you do have some fire in you. So good, you're going to need it. And then he's like, I am what I am, mother. I stand ready for what comes. Slipping back into Lan's training. And she's asking him about Mat and Perrin, and they're going after the horn and the dagger. Are you going to go with them? And which Rand didn't know they were going, and he's like, and they're telling him about the dagger and everything and what's going to happen. And he's like, Egwene and Nynaeve are going to the tower. Perrin and Mat are going with Ingtar. So if you stay here, and you're welcome to stay here, you're on, you're going to be alone. So, but Lord Aglamar will have you as a guest for as long as you'd like. So, and he's very puzzled by this in this scene in the book. And she's like, you don't have to make the choice now, but you will have to choose before Ingtar leaves. And he's like, I will ride with Ingtar, Mother. So he decides to go. And she goes, now that that's dealt with, can we move on to important matters? And I know you can channel, boy. What do you know? And she's like, right to the heart of the matter once that's settled. And at this point, everything Lan was teaching him goes out of his head. He just doesn't know what to do. He just wants to run, pretty much. And she realizes that she leaned forward in her seat, waiting for an answer, but he had the feeling she wanted to lean back. And this is when he starts to realize that she might actually be afraid of him. And he's like, no, I can't. I mean, I didn't do it on purpose. It just happened. I don't want to channel. I won't do it again. I swear it. Which we see in the show. He makes these promises. And she says, you don't want to. That's wise and foolish. Some can be taught. Most cannot. A few have the seed in them at birth. Sooner or later, they will wield the one power, whether they want or not, as surely as roe makes fish. You will continue to channel, boy. You can't help it. And you had better learn to channel, learn to control it, or you will not live long enough to go mad. The one power kills those who cannot control its flow. And he wants to know, how am I supposed to learn? He demanded. How? Moiraine claims she can't teach me anything, and I don't know how to learn or what. I don't want to anyway. I want to stop. To just stop. And Moiraine's like, I told you the truth. Those who could teach you are the male Aes Sedai. They're all 1,000 years dead. No Aes Sedai living can teach you to touch Sidon any more than you could learn to touch Saidar. And that's Sidon is the male half of the one power that only men can channel. Saidar is the female half of the one power that only women can channel. Something this TV show still continues to not explain to its audience. And she says, a bird cannot teach a fish to fly, nor a fish teach a bird to swim. And Varen interrupts, well, there are these birds that dive and swim, and then there are some fish that can sort of leap through the air and almost fly, and then realizes she's rambling and shuts up. Which is, again, Varen kind of showing her personality here, that sort of brown Aja, like, ooh, a chance for information. And Varen playing the role Varen is choosing to play here in this TV show. And Rand, it's like takes this interruption to like kind of regain his composure because he's very flustered. And he pictures the single flame, the flame in the void. This is sort of meditative technique that Tam taught him a long time ago. He forms a single flame in his mind, feeds all of his fears into it, seeking emptiness and stillness of the void. And the flame seems to grow until it envelops everything, and until it's too large to contain or imagine any longer. And with that, it's gone, and it leaves only in its place a sense of peace. Like the fire just appears in the void, he feeds everything that's bothering him into it, and it burns it away and leaves him calm. And thought skimmed across its surface like pebbles across ice. And the Aes Sedai's attention was off him only for a moment, but when they turned back, he was calm. And Rand is like, why are you talking to me like this, Mother? You should be gentling me. And the Amyrlin frowns at him and she's like, looks at Moiraine. She's like, did Lan teach him this? And he's like, no, Mother, he had it from Tam Althor. So the Amyrlin can see that he's doing this sort of meditative practice that is something that he wouldn't be expected to have any concept of, but Tam had taught him this. And he's like, why? Why are you doing this? And she just looks at him and goes, because you are the dragon reborn. And everything just shifts in Rand, in his head. And he basically, the world feels like it's tilting. And he's like, no, Mother, I can channel the light help me, but I am not Rowland Darksbane, nor Guara Malazan, nor Urian Strongbow. You can gentle me or kill me, or let me go, but I will not be a tame false dragon on a Tarvalon leash. And Rand says something sort of akin to that in this scene. And Varian's kind of gasp, and the Amyrlin's eyes widen, and they want to know, like, where the hell did he hear these names? And he says that Tom Merlin, but he taught him, but Merlin's dead, and Moiraine kind of makes a noise about that. And the Amyrlin's like, you're not a false dragon. You are the true dragon reborn. And he's fighting it. It's like, no, I'm a shepherd from the Two Rivers. And she says, daughter, tell him the story, a true story, boy, listen well. And Moiraine recounts the Aiel coming across the spine of the world, ravaging through this city of through Carian, destroying an army, every army sent against them, burning the city of Carian itself. And they fought all the way to Tar Valon. And winter, snowing, cold, heat doesn't mean anything to an Aiel. The final battle, the last that counted, was fought right outside the shining walls of the White Tower, in the shadow of Dragonmount, for 3 days and 3 nights of fighting. And then the Aiel returned back, or rather they turned away themselves, because they had done what they came to do, which is to kill King Laman of Carian. Laman was a Damodred, by the way, a relative of Rand and Moiraine, and for his sin against the tree. And it's then that my story begins, and yours. And then Rand is picturing what Tam, in his sort of Tam's fever from the venom in the first book. And we got this sort of scene in episode 7 of last season, where they came over the dragon wall like a flood, all the way to the shining walls. And Rand is hearing Tam's voice, like rambling in the night, in the darkness, while Rand is trying to take him back to the Two Rivers from the beginning, in the beginning of the story. And just like in the cold open of this TV show, they had that scene of Tigraine, like, giving birth and dying, interspersed with Guittara's foretelling. In the book here, as Moiraine is recounting Guittara's foretelling, Rand is reimagining, thinking of everything Tam was saying and how it lines up with Guittara's foretelling sort of prophecy. And it's a great scene. Again, so much more powerful here in this book, doing it this way, by having Moiraine tell it to Rand and having it from Rand's point of view, hearing this foretelling and his rambling words of his father, or who he thinks his father, or who he knows really isn't his father anymore, rambling in the snow or whatever as he's trying to save his father's life. And then she's like, this is how we knew the dragon was reborn. And the Amyrlin swore us to secrecy, we too, for we knew not all the sisters would see the rebirth as it is. And she sent us to searching. And, we learned that Moiraine is like pretty much ended up being the primary one searching, and Siuan rose through the ranks, gaining power, and became the Amyrlin. So that as a pair, when the dragon was found, the two of them would prepare him for the last battle. And she's saying about, then in the Two Rivers, where the old blood of Benethrin still seethes still like a river in a flood, in Emond's Field, I found 3 boys whose name days were within weeks of the Battle of Dragonmount, and one of them can channel. Do you think Trollocs came after you just because you are Ta'veren? You are the dragon reborn. And Rand drops to his knees here from just the sheer weight of the moment in the book. And he's like trying to deny it. He's like, my father is Tam Althor, and I was born. And he knows it's true, no matter how much he wants to say they're lying. And he's like insistent, I won't be used by you. And the Amyrlin is just talking to him. It's like, this is your purpose, Rand. The last battle is coming, and you were born to unite mankind and lead them against the Dark One. And Rand is like, Balsamon is dead. And she's like, if you believe that, you're a fool. And it's your destiny. You have to face the Dark One. It's your destiny. And he's heard that before in a dream that maybe hadn't been a dream. And he wondered if the Amyrlin would say, if she knew Balsamon had said pretty much the same thing to him, that it's your destiny. And he realized at this point he's crouching. And he gets up and he stands up and tall. And he remembers, like basically face everything on your feet. And he's, again, hearing his father's like delirious voice. Rand is a good name, Kari, and all this stuff. In between him, I won't be used. And it's such a well-written scene in the books that everything just has so much more force. Now, if you watch this episode and you're listening to me telling you this, and then you're remembering how this scene played out in this episode, you may be showing, like, where is this scene? Because this is not what happens in the TV show. And he's like, what are you going to do to me? And this is where the TV show goes completely off the rails. Because here in the book, the Amyrlin says nothing. And he's like, you say you want to accompany your friend with Ingtar, and you may. I've not marked you out in any way. Some of the sisters may know you are Taverin, but no more. Only we three know who you truly are. Your friend Perrin will be brought to me, and so will Matt, with no fear. I'm going to meet with all of you, so none of you stand out. No one has to think anything other than we're just interested in meeting some Taverin. You may go as you will, without fear that we will set the Red Sisters on you. And, she's like, the prophecies must be fulfilled. We let you walk free, knowing what you are, because otherwise the world we know will die, and the Dark One will cover the earth with fire and death. Mark me, not all Aes Sedai feel the same. There are some here in Feldara who would strike you down if they knew a tenth of what you are, and feel no more remorse than for gutting a fish. But then there are men who've no doubt laughed with you who would do the same if they knew. Have a care, Randall Thor, Dragon Reborn. And Land's instructions come back to him there. And because he realizes he's dismissed. And left hand on his hilt, he twists the sword behind him, catching the scabbard with his left hand, twisted it behind, catches it in his right, and bows, arms straight, and by your leave, mother, may I depart. And she's like, give you leave, my son. And then he leaves. And he's like, I will not be used. This is the last word, and he walks out. That's the scene. And then there's a brief conversation with the Amyrlin telling them, it's like, I cannot like myself what I just did, but it was necessary. And do you think it'll work, daughters? And Moiraine is in short. She's like, I don't know, but it was necessary, and it is. And Varen is like, necessary? He is strong and as stubborn as you said, Moiraine, much stronger than I expected. We may have to gentle him after all before. And then her eyes widen. But we can't. We cannot, can we? The prophecies. The light forgive us for what we are loosing on the world. And then the prophecies, Moiraine said, nodding. Afterwards, we will do as we must, as we do now. As we must, said the Amyrlin. Yes, but when he learns to channel, the light help us all. And that's how that ends. Now, they understand that pushing him out the door with Perrin and Matt and Ingtar and the Shienarans, the pattern will do what the pattern needs to do. He's a powerful Taverin. He's the Dragon Reborn. So if he hunts for the horn, the pattern is going to force Rand to begin learning what he needs to learn to be ready for when the world learns he really is the dragon. He has to start to learn how to lead soldiers and lead men, how to deal with powerful, noble lords and society. He has to learn all these skills because he's a sheep herder from Emond's Field, a tiny little town in the corner of the continent that most of the world has forgotten is even there. So he has a lot he needs to learn. And the point of book 2, in some ways, is Rand going out onto the road with these soldiers and his friends and everything that happens as a result. Rand is being put in these situations by the pattern. He's learning how to build camaraderie with soldiers, with fighting men. He's learning how, when he ends up briefly in Carrion in the book, because he's in Carrion just for a couple of days in book 2. But he's just caught up in Daes Dae'mar, the great game of the houses. And he just throws a monkey wrench in that entire city in the book. He's there 3 days, and he causes so much disruption, being such a powerful Taverin, that he basically kind of topples the kingdom, sort of, when all is said and done. Bodies start dropping, a king is assassinated, everything goes to hell in that city because Rand al'Thor came there for a few days. But they're trusting that, he has to get out there and learn. Otherwise, when he is discovered, if he has no skills, if he hasn't prepared, someone's just going to put him in a box or kill him and just dump his body in a ditch and just hope they find another way to deal with the last battle if it ever comes. And Here's what happens in the TV show. If you watch this episode, Rand comes in, he does that I stand ready, mother thing, and it looks like, oh, we're actually going to get this scene. There's no Moiraine, there's no Verin, but at least it's the Amyrlin. He's getting a little line of dialogue that we recognize from the books. And then the show cuts away and goes off to do other things. And then when it comes back and we get this whole conversation with the Amyrlin and Rand in this TV show, in this episode, they've basically replaced Siuan Sanche with Elaida Sedai. They've just turned Siuan into Elaida at this point. Now, if you've only watching this show, you haven't read these books, Elaida Sedai is a very, very powerful Sedai. She's a Red Aja. She's a Red Sister. She is the chief advisor, pretty much, to Queen Morghese of Andor. She's the personal advisor and protector of Elaine Tracan's mother. And Rand meets her in book 1 because Rand ends up in Camelin in book 1 as they're journeying away from the Two Rivers. That was all cut out. They didn't do that in the first season. But you should have met Elaida here by now in season 2 because Elaida does come to the White Tower before the girls are sold out to the Seanchan by Liandrin in the book. So, and there are things coming involving the Amyrlin, and Siuan in particular, the Amyrlin, the White Tower, that Elaida Sedai is central to. And they really need to start laying the groundwork for that, because that's coming next season, I would think. If it's not going to be in this season finale, they might, for all I know, do a particular thing in this season finale instead. And, we kind of need Elaida Sedai, but she's not there. But the way Siuan acts in this scene, in the TV show, Rand is like, she's like basically telling him the same thing. You're the Dragon Reborn. We know who you are. Don't try lying. What's going on? Can you channel? What have you learned? And Rand gets upset. He starts channeling, and she just basically hits him with the one power and shields him immediately, drives him to his knees. And she's just basically insulting him. And so Moiraine's taught you nothing. And she's telling him, you know what we're going to do with you? Some of the Reds want to gentle you, but we need you for the last battle. So we're going to put you in a cage, and we're going to keep you in a cage, and we're going to keep you shielded, and we're going to let you channel how we want, when we want, doing what we want, until the last battle comes. And then you'll be our biggest weapon, but you won't be our general. And that is not Siuan Sanche. That is not this scene. This is the complete opposite. That is what Elaida Sedai wants to do to Rand, pretty much. That's what the Reds want to do. They want to throw the Dragon Reborn basically in a box or in a cell and chain him up and keep him permanently shielded until whenever the last battle shows up, and then just pretty much throw him at the Dark One. So this is not Siuan Sanche, a completely different character. So they just destroyed Siuan as a character in this episode. I was just shocked watching this scene play out the way they did it, by just having Siuan be a completely different person and react the opposite of what she does. Because I just kind of walked you through, I did a summarized reading of that scene in the book. And they go through all this stuff, they say some of these things, but in the end they just let him go about his way, because they know this is the only way he's going to be ready in a way that he needs to be ready. And it's just, so in this episode, she shields him, drives him to his knees, and he stays on his knees pretty much the whole rest of this episode until the very end. So again, in the book, Lan is like, whatever happens, you face it on your feet. And Lan, in the book, is driven to his knees by the sheer weight of the moment, not by the Amyrlin. And he realizes he's on his knees and gets up. He finds his strength in his backbone and he stands up. And he faces the rest of that scene on his feet. And in this TV show, that Rand is not allowed in this TV show. He is shielded, thrown on the floor, and he's just staying on his knees, shielded. Moiraine comes into the room. Her and the Amyrlin have an argument. And then we see Rand, and he's basically locked in a room, being guarded by Leanne, the keeper. Still on his knees, still shielded. Just... So they just don't like the Rand al'Thor in this TV show. Because, again, outside of those 15 seconds in the season 1 finale where Rand stands up, holds the Sarangriel little statue, and beams some power at Ashamael, outside of those 15 seconds, has Rand al'Thor done anything in this actual TV show of any kind of significance? If you took Rand out of this TV show, would anything be different other than those 15 seconds? And even those 15 seconds, Logain in this TV show is powerful enough where they could have just dragged Logain's shielded ass to the eye of the world and given him the little statue, and he could have just done that. They didn't need Rand for that. So Rand has been just completely neutered as a character so far in this TV series. Because again, the point of what's happening in this book, Rand is on the road. He's with Mat, he's with Perrin, he's with Loial, he's with Ingtar and Uno and the Shienarans. He's learning how to deal with soldiers. He's learning how to lead. The tracker is this guy Huron, the sniffer. Huron, it's like no one's going to convince Huron that Rand isn't a lord from somewhere, and he's Lord Rand as far as he's concerned. And when Rand comes to Carian, the whole city thinks he's a lord, because here he is, this well-dressed man, gorgeous woman on his arm, an Ogier as a traveling companion, a manservant who's calling him Lord Rand, and he looks like an Aielman. And for an Aiel-blooded lord to come strolling into the city of Carian that had been burned to the ground 20 years earlier by the Aiel, you know, that whole city like shakes its foundations in a sense. Just the whole Daes Dae'mar is turned on its head because Rand walks through the doors. And in this TV show, he's been in Carian for months and months and months, and no one's even noticed, and no repercussions, nothing of any kind, other than, you know, Lanfear being Lanfear and just deciding, you know, she's had enough of playing games. But Rand himself has, I mean, other than the mentioning that he was a Ta'veren briefly, has this show even showed you what that even means? Has this show shown you what a Ta'veren is and what impact it has on people and events? Because in the third book, which we've seen hardly any of the third book in this season, and we were told this was going to be book 2 with a lot of book 3 like squeezed in, because season 3 is meant to be book 4 according to the showrunner, Shadow Rising. And I think the only book 3 anything we've gotten was Rand freeing an Aiel person, an Aiel woman, Avienda, in a cage instead of Gaul, an Aiel man in a cage. So he frees an Aiel from the cage. That's really the only actual legit season 3 thing I can think of in this book, other than Dane Bornhold being there instead of his father, who's going to just pop back up in the season finale. But they've just thrown most of book 3 away at this point. And with the repeated references in this episode to the dragon will reveal himself, you know, banner burning in the sky at Tolman's head, it's starting to sound like this show might not even be doing the Stone of Tyr. It's because, yes, he is revealed as the dragon on Tolman's head at the end of this book, but that's a localized reveal. It's revealed to the people who happen to be there and witness it for the most part on that plain, Helmuth Plain. But it isn't until he takes the Stone of Tyr in book 3 where the world realizes, oh, the actual real dragon's here, because the Stone of Tyr is unconquerable. It's, you know, no one, it's never been conquered, can't be conquered. And one of the prophecies, one of the big prophecies, that the one that will let everyone know, oh, okay, this is actually the dragon, is that the dragon will take the stone. And that's what Rand does. In book 3, Rand is like, all right, I need to know one way or another, am I really the dragon? I'm going to take the Stone of Tyr. If I can't do it, then they're all wrong. I'm not really the dragon. I'm just another man who can channel. And if I take it, all right, I'll accept that I'm the dragon reborn. And that's what he sets off to do in book 3. And he just like beelines for the Stone of Tyr. And I thought we were going to get some of this stuff sort of happening in this season, like interspersed. I thought they were going to try to fit some of the repercussions of that here in the season, even though he's going to Falme instead of Tyr in this season. Because, like, when Rand is on his way to Tyr in book 3, like, they're chasing after him. Perrin and the Moiraine and them, they're trying to catch up because he just sneaks out in the middle of the night and just takes off. And they come into these towns, and they know whether Rand's been in that town because crazy things happened when Rand was there. Like they come into one town and every person in that town who was unmarried all spontaneously all marry each other on the same day just because Rand happened to show up, and the pull of him as a Ta'veren at this point is so powerful. Because the moment Rand makes the decision to go to Tyr, it's like, I'm going to take Tyr, and if I do it, I'm the dragon. If I can't, I'm not. The moment he moves toward, like deliberately toward prophecy, his sort of presence as a Ta'veren just starts just spiraling and just pulling stronger and stronger, and he changes everything around him as he's going. Weird things happen just for him passing by. And I'm surprised we haven't gotten some of this, because there's no way Rand can stay in the city of Carian for months on end without like just all sorts of craziness happening in that city spontaneously as a result of his such powerful Ta'veren being there. And there is none of that in this TV show. Absolutely none. You have no idea. There's nothing to show that Rand's a Ta'veren, that Perrin's a Ta'veren, that Mat's Ta'veren. Nothing of any significance at all. So this is one area the show has really failed at, is, showing what this stuff means. Because it does impact the story, and it does impact what happens and how things happen. Like I've mentioned this before, there are characters like Bail Doman, for example, and a few others that they end up in places the pattern needs them to be to help these people. Like Rand, Mat, Perrin, even Nynaeve, Egwene, Elaine. The pattern pushes pieces on the chessboard, Bail Doman being one of them, like I mentioned. And he ends up going to places he might not have gone because the pattern is just pulling him there, and he doesn't even, whether he knows it or not, so that he shows up where he's needed. And you have a few people like this. Even Min is caught up in that, sort of a victim of the power of Ta'veren in some ways. And the show is just dropped the ball completely on showing that aspect of on these characters and on events in this story. But anyway, that is the book Rand Meeting the Amyrlin and the TV show Rand Meeting the Amyrlin. So just completely unrecognizable, this TV scene from the book. So let's see. And now, so we get this scene, Rand's been shielded, he's on his knees, Moiraine comes into the room, and Siuan wants to know why Moiraine didn't tell her. Why didn't you tell me you were stilled? Months of letters from you, and you didn't bother to mention that part. And, you failed. You were supposed to be with this kid, and you weren't there. You're supposed to be guiding him, protecting everyone else from him if the need be. And you got your ass stilled, so you're a failure. So we tried it your way, now we're doing it my way, and that's why she's also reminding Moiraine she's going to lock him up and just keep him locked up, which again is totally not Siuan Sanche. Okay, now let's get to Mat Cauthon. Now, again, in the book, Mat is on the hunt for the horn. He's with Perrin and Ingtar and them, going after the horn and going after the dagger. Mat in this TV show is wandering around the foregate because he listened to Min, and Min just told him, don't go with Rand to Falm because I saw a vision of you killing Rand, so you can't go. So Mat was forced to abandon Rand last episode. So he's wandering around kind of forlorn, and he's attacked from behind and knocked out. And the next thing we know, Mat wakes up in like this carpeted floor in a room, and Lanfear is there. And Lanfear says, welcome to Falm. And Lanfear basically just kidnapped Mat and brought him to Falm. Somehow he got there immediately. The show hasn't bothered to show us how this was done, whether she dragged his unconscious ass through a waygate, or whether, the show is going to have the, what's known as traveling that the Forsaken can do, some of the Forsaken. So, but he's just now, Mat's in Falm. And then we get we only get one more Mat scene, pretty much, or Mat is there, and Ishamael's there, and Ishamael's making tea, and he's talking to Mat. And he's talking to Mat about how like basically the wheel keeps going round and round. And just trying to find my notes here. So, Shamil's talking to him. He's making tea, and he's talking to Matt about the wheel and how our lives repeat over and over and over. And we die, and the wheel spits us back out again into another life. And okay, there is Matt being Matt for a moment here in this episode, where he goes, "Is this a sex thing or a murder thing? Because either way, I'd prefer if you just skip the talking." Which I thought was really funny, and that struck me as a very kind of Matt thing, because that's kind of Matt uses humor in situations where he might be like unsure and uncomfortable. He kind of like cracks jokes and tries to make light of things. It's just part of his personality. So that was probably my favorite part of the episode. One of my favorite Matt moments this season was that line: "Is this a sex thing or a murder thing? Because either way, can you just shut up, and get to it," kind of thing. And he says, Shamael's like, "Neither, actually. I have a gift for you." And Shamael pours Matt, has this tea. And he goes, "This tea, it shows you things, lets you glimpse your past lives, 1,000 yous. And through all of that, the real one, your soul. 15 minutes, then pour a cup for yourself. Only one." And then Shamael leaves, and leaves Matt alone. And he's been telling Matt, he knows who Matt really is. And he knows that Matt has always wanted to know who he really is. And this tea will show Matt this will show you, Matt, who you really are. So then our next Matt scene, Matt pours the cup of tea and he drinks it down in one gulp. And he's sitting there, and at first he's like, "Oh, this is all crap. This just hasn't done anything." But when he tries to stand up, he's woozy and he's wobbly and he starts hallucinating. And then he sees his mother. And again, we're back to the assassination of the Cawthon family in this TV show. Because I'm convinced there's somebody in this production company who hates this character. And his mother is like telling him, she's cursing him and denouncing him. He's a horrible, evil person, just like his father. And then Matt, he's like, sees himself in a mirror, and he's hanging. Like, he's hanging in a mirror. And then he sees himself, I think, killing his friends. Like, he might be drowning Rand, and I don't know if that's a Gwen who he kills. And he's like screaming to stop, and stop. And he falls down. He's screaming, "Stop, stop, stop," over and over. And then his body morphs into his mother on the floor, screaming, "Stop." And then he bends down and kind of lifts her up into his lap. And she looks up at him, and he's looking down at her like with this crazy look, and she screams, and then he screams down at her, and then her face turns into him, and it's Matt holding Matt, and Matt screaming at Matt while Matt screams at Matt. I always get that keyboard shortcut to mute the mic backwards. Now, this was a cool little scene. It was very David Lynchian to me. And very well done for what it was. I have a couple of issues with it, though. I really hope that this isn't meant to replace any flicker, flicker, flicker scene. And I really hope this is not meant to replace the red door frame Terangriel. I'm hoping that this is just kind of a setup leading to that stuff that's going to come later. So, I don't know. And because, again, big difference here in how this episode ends, how they leave Carrion, Rand and Moiraine and them, how they leave Carrion is very different in the book than it is in this TV show. But Matt, Rand, and Perrin, a bunch of them all go through this sort of flicker, 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 flicker thing with this portal stone in the book, where each of them sees like 1,000, 10,000 versions of their life play out in like an instant, over and over and over and over and over and over and over, while they're being transported by this portal stone. So if you've only watched this show and you know someone who's read the books, and you say, just go to them and say, "Hey, you know that Wheel of Time books you're reading?" And just go flicker, 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 and you'll see what reaction they have. They'll have a reaction, because we get our first flicker scene in the Great Hunt when they're leaving. They've left Carrion and they need to get to Falm. But anyway, so I'm hoping that Matt and his tea here is not replacing any of Matt. We all we know from what Matt saw in his flicker, because we only saw Rand's flicker scenes in that scene in the books, but Matt like looks at Rand, he's like, I promise I won't betray you, kind of thing. Just like Matt blurts that out. So Matt must have seen some version of events where he joins the dark side and betrays them all. And I really hope that this TV show isn't just taking that little reference in that moment in book 2 and just deciding, hey, let's make that Matt's TV show plot. So I hope this is all being set up to just bring Matt to that moment where he would turn heel, for him to remember who he was and become the good guy and choose the light, and then we go forward and just get proper Matt Coffin from there. Because they're certainly setting Matt up to be turned to the dark side and become a dark friend and a bad guy. So I just hope it's a fake out setup and that he's not going to actually go there in this TV show, because he's just too critical a character to how things play out in this in the story in the books to not have Matt on the side of the light. But overall, I mean, it was an interesting scene, even though I don't really know what they're planning on doing with that afterwards. You know, and again, very David Lynch in feel. I was almost waiting for the little dwarf to sort of be filmed that sort of backwards and then played in reverse, so it's that sort of stuttery walk movement to come strolling into the room doing his little dwarf scene dance from that, was it episode 3 of the first season of Twin Peaks. But overall, cool little moment. It's a bit jarring in how different it is, but I like seeing that because something this show really hasn't touched on yet, and only because we're just barely getting the Forsaken showing up. We're at the start of that. As more of the Forsaken, as once we get Mogideon and some others coming into play, I really hope this show leans heavy into that sort of horror element that some of the Forsaken have. Because, like, particularly Mogideon and some of the others, they're nasty. And they have quite interesting tastes, and they lean into the horror aspect of things. So I hope this show does, like, go there when it should be there. And this scene here, for what it is, even though I'm not a fan of what they're doing to Matt in this TV show at all, at least this was the first interesting thing Matt has had to do this season. So, and it does hint that the show might go into that sort of horroristic sort of realm when it comes to Forsaken things. So it's promising, even though I still hate what they're doing with Matt's character overall in this TV show. But this was the first time it was actually interesting and compelling, and very well shot and very well acted on Donald Finn's part. You could see here why this man ended up getting this part after Barney Harris left. So really well done, really great acting out of Donald here. He is a very different, physically different character when it comes to Matt than the Barney Harris was. Barney is more playful, even though he was much more brooding in season 1, because he was really succumbing to the dagger a lot, because they didn't seem to know what to do with his character in that first book all that much, because so much of what Rand and Matt go through while they're traveling separate from everybody else, they cut all that out, and we hardly saw any of their journey before they meet back up with everyone in that book 1. So there's so little of it they got to do in the TV show. So there wasn't much for them to give Matt to do other than him just kind of looking sick and feeling sick and yelling at kids and stuff. So very un-Matt-like. So Barney Harris didn't have a lot to do, but he had this sort of different sort of physicality to him than Donald Finn has. He seemed a bit more fluid in terms of his body language, a bit more loose in terms of body language than Donald has a bit more. He brings a bit of more of a wound tight Matt, which makes sense for where Matt is at this point, or we're supposed to be at this point in the books, where time is running out for Matt and to get that dagger back. So Matt's under a lot of pressure in this point of the story. even though, again, what's happening to him here in this TV show is completely different. But Donald does bring a different physicality, and it's interesting to see what he brings as an actor to the role, and you saw some of that in this scene. And I do think that that's going to serve him well as an actor if he gets to do what Matt gets to do as we get deeper into the story. Particularly once Matt gets his, let's say his particular, was it spear that he acquires in a particular place that should be coming next season. So I think Donald Finn is going to do a really good job with the physicality of Matt as a warrior, as a fighter, and as a battle commander kind of thing that he sort of develops into as the story goes. So I think, even though I really loved Barney Harris as Matt, because he really had that playfulness to him that Matt should have, I think Donald might, physicality-wise, be a better choice to carry this character deeper into the story for the direction that hopefully, well, Matt goes in the books at least. This show, I have no faith that he's going to go that direction in the TV show. No idea what this show is doing to some of these characters. But it was a very interesting scene, and one of the things that I actually quite liked about the episode. So I'm probably going to go back and rewatch that Matt T scene a few more times, because there's a lot of little things that the actor does there with the character that I thought were very well done. Okay. And then we have Perrin and Aviendha. And we finally get Bane and Chiad, in the episode. Two more Maidens of the Spear. And Bane and Chiad, they're such great characters in the books. And again, I understand why the TV show is teaming them up with Perrin, even though Aviendha, Bane, and Chiad meet Nynaeve, Gwen, and Elaine in book 3, and not Perrin. And again, I don't think Perrin and Aviendha ever have a conversation in the entire 14-book series. But Bane and Chiad, however, do spend a lot of time in Perrin's sort of plot arc in this whole story. So I guess more so for Bane and Chiad meeting Perrin here, it fits in the overall story and the TV show only has so much time to let all this stuff play out. So it makes sense from that aspect that it's really by meeting Aviendha, he gets to meet Bane and Chiad, who become such important parts to, where Perrin's story goes. Hold on. And again, every single time I try to mute this mic, I end up turning the camera off. Okay, one of these days I'll remember. But anyway, we have Perrin and Aviendha and Hopper, and they're heading through, it's almost desert-like land, but it says that they're nearing Toman Head. They're on, was it Amroth Plain or Almuth Plain? Heading to Toman Head where Falm is. So that's where they're not that far away now. And you see Bane, turns out to be Bane, kind of crouching, almost camouflaged among the sort of the dirt and the desert sand kind of thing. It's not really full desert, but it's desert-esque. And then she takes them to Chiad. And it's like, Aviendha's like, take me to Jolien. And Jolien is another one of the Aiel, and they take her to what's turns out to be Jolien's grave. Because Jolien, you learn Jolien was injured earlier off-screen, and this is when apparently Aviendha had been captured. And Bane, Chiad, and Jolien must have fled, and they were taking Jolien away because she was hurt, and Jolien succumbs to her injuries off-screen. And this is where we're learning that all this must have happened. And then we get the maiden hand talk. The Maidens of the Spear have this sort of hand talk with each other, something similar to like if you watch the Dune movie, you see Lady Jessica and Paul. They have that sort of Atreides hand talk amongst them, between the two of them. And I actually like it the way that they handled it in Dune better than the Aiel. And the Aiel are like Robert Jordan's Fremen kind of thing. But I don't know how I feel about the Maiden Hand Talk in the TV show yet. It's much more, it's much bigger than it was. They're like, it's big movements. And I find that just not really realistic, because the maidens use hand talk when they're in like fighting and doing all sorts of things, very quick communication. So I would have thought it would have been that more subtler kind of very quick stuff that only the maidens know how to read. Because, you know, when you're in the like fighting and you're kind of giving instructions and you don't want to tell it out loud, you know, stopping what you're doing and going like they're doing in this TV show, it seems way too over exaggerated for it to be practical. But it's just with the show, the aesthetic they've chosen for the show. And then we get Aviendha trying to meet her toe to Jolien. And Perrin is standing there trying to figure out what's going on. They take their spears and things off. And Bane and Chiad just start beating the crap out of Aviendha. And she's not defending herself. And she's, you know, Bane is like, you stand there, don't interfere. And yes, Matt, yes, I thought it was very strange watching them beat Aviendha for failing in battle. I did too. Now, I've said this before, the Aiel are a complex, complicated society. And they're very peculiar people with very peculiar rules that don't make any sense to what they call wetlanders. Their sense of humor is hard to understand. Their cultural aspects are difficult to understand. The Ji'ito is an odd thing to wrap your head around. And the books, you know, they go through this, and it's presented from, you know, the point of view of, you know, these are Matt and Rand and them. They're trying to figure out what these people are crazy. Like, what the hell are they doing with each other? So this show is trying to find ways to sort of get the oddness of their culture across, and to get the importance of toe. They just call it toe. It's like Ji'ito is this whole sort of thing. And hopefully they'll get into it a little bit more as the show goes. And in this show, it's like Aviendha has what she calls toe. She owes a debt. And they decided here in the TV show that her way to pay the debt is for them to just beat the crap out of her for a few minutes. And then her debt's paid off. Now, in the book, depending upon the significance of the toe you have, your debt, I mean, I forget the name that they call it, something like a Gaishan or some Gaiden or something like that, where they'll basically become almost like a servant for an entire year. They'll they'll put on like a white frock, and they'll just be that other person's basically slave for a year almost. And this is how they meet their toe, by basically just stripping away being a fighter, and they're just serving. So it's a very, very different thing in the way they act in their society. But the show has very limited time, so I think this was kind of their shortcut to show that they're a harsh, hard warrior people, and this is their strange way of like trying to pay their debts to their friends. So I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but considering how bad the show has handled some other things, this is about as good as I can hope for when it comes to them trying to portray the Aiel. You know, I won't really know until next season what to feel about how this TV show is doing them. Because now, again, I've mentioned this before as well in some live streams. I mean, I only know that's Bane and Chiad because the TV show tells me it's Bane and Chiad. They don't look like Bane and Chiad. I mean, they generally look like an Aiel made in the spear should look. You know, the casting is fine. But Bane is supposed to have like this bright red hair. And Chiad, I believe, is this like bright goldenish sort of hair. And Aviendha is supposed to have this sort of deep red hair. And all three of them, their hair should be like no longer than, it shouldn't even come down to their shoulders. Because maidens, they're warriors, so they're not going to have long hair trailing behind them that anyone can just grab and be a risk to them fighting. So, and Bane and Chiad in particular, you should know them on sight without being told who they are. And I'm worried that all the Aiel are just going to look like like 50 extras that they just pulled off the street and threw in costumes. So, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I mean, they hardly had anything to do. I don't even know if Chia said much of anything in this show. But these are great characters in the books. And it's going to be strange, however, if we don't get Gaul. Because we have Gaul, who was the Aiel that was in the cage in the books that Perrin frees. And Gaul basically becomes almost kind of attaches himself to Perrin because he owes Perrin this sort of debt. And so he basically is with Perrin for a lot of Perrin's story. And Bane and Chiad come along as well because Gaul and Bane and Chiad have this sort of weird thing going on amongst them in the books. And I don't know if this show is even going to have Gaul. They took him out where he was supposed to be introduced, so hopefully we get him later. Maybe he'll just be in the Threefold Land. But Perrin doesn't go to the Threefold Land, so how Perrin and Gaul are going to meet, and why Gaul would tag along with Perrin afterwards, there's no reason in the show for him to do that because they gave that to Aviendha. So, and I don't know how Aviendha is going to meet her toe to Perrin in this TV show because there's no way they're going to just give Aviendha the plot Gaul had. I cannot see them doing that with Aviendha at all. And that would be just like, what's the point of even having Aviendha in the TV show if they go that route? So I just don't know how they're going to handle this. And watching Bane and Chiad beat the crap out of Aviendha for Aviendha to meet her debt to Jolien, I mean, is Perrin going to have to beat the crap out of her in this TV show for her to have her debt fulfilled? I mean, or is she going to save Perrin's life? Is probably what it's going to be. Like maybe Perrin's going to get recaptured and she'll free him and then her toe will be met and yada, 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 yada. So who knows? But anyway, they're traveling after this. They say their thing with Jolien. She gets beaten up. They pay her debt and they travel on their way. And they arrive at this body of water and across the way is basically Falm. And it is the worst shot, fake night scene I think I've ever seen in a TV show before. Because, there are tricks you can do where you can film in the daytime and you use these filters and things to make it look like it's nighttime. And they must have got the cheapest, $10 filter because it looked bad. It looked really bad. So I was really surprised at how just cheap it looked. Trying to portray that as they were out at night. So I was really, really surprised at how poor that looked when they finally arrived sort of across this water from Falm. Okay, so, and then we have, so let's get to a Gwen. I liked it. Gwen was barely in this episode, but she had one main scene, a scene and a half, but they were really good. We see a Gwen, she's still going through her Damane training. Her and the other sort of newer Damane, they're all brought to this sort of open field. And there's a particular weave that they're being tested with. It's a weave that shoots a burst of air. And the Seanchan use it apparently because it will show the extent of a Damane's actual power. What level of one power they can channel. And you see one of them does it first, and there's this sort of a ring of air that kind of, it's like boom, and you see the ground just around her just kind of be impacted. It doesn't go very far, maybe 10 yards or more, 10, 20 yards. And then when it's Gwen's turn, Rena, her Suldam, is talking to her. It's this is your time to shine. Don't worry about it. I don't really even need your help to do this. I can just make you do it with the bracelets and stuff. But she's telling her, it's now they'll see that I have the best Damane. It's it'll be a status symbol for Rena. And then she starts sort of pulling, you can see the bracelet, the power reaching out into the Egwene's collar, and more, Egwene's pulling more and more and more of the one power into her. And then lets it go, and this burst just barrels outwards, this burst of air, and knocks everyone else down, just knocks them all down. And then we cut to in town in the market. You sort of hear this boom, and the market like shakes. That's how powerful it is. And it's a nice scene. It's a well done scene. It reminds the audience that, or it gives the audience an idea of just how powerful Egwene actually can be. And just how accelerated Egwene's training is, unfortunately under the worst circumstances, but she's now already well ahead of any novices who started training at the same time as she did in the White Tower. And that's one of the unexpected benefits Egwene is going to get from this part of the story, is how accelerated her training is here because of what she's put through and how the relationship the Seanchan have with the One Power, in that it's a tool, and you use the tool to the tool's fullest availability. Just like I said, I've talked about this in my last week's live stream, how it's a very different relationship with the One Power than the Aes Sedai have, because the Aes Sedai have a very cautious approach to it. And yeah, Matt Jacobson says, I found it curious that Rena lets Egwene keep her name, unlike in the books where she's renamed Tully. And yes, I think she does initially let Egwene keep her name, but when Egwene pisses her off one too many times, she strips her of her name and names her Tully at that point. And I was surprised in the follow-up scene in this episode that we get. Egwene's back in her room, and Rena has like a bowl, and she's like washing like the dirt off of Egwene's arms, almost like she's washing her pet kind of thing. This is that sort of weird Sul'dam-Damane relationship. And she's talking about how proud she is, and trying to just find my notes here. I should just write this stuff grouped together by what each one does rather than writing it out. Because this is another episode where they keep bouncing from person to person to person to person. We're with them for 10 seconds, and then we're on to the next person for 30 seconds, and then we're on to these people for 20 seconds, and then we're back to that one for another 20 seconds. This has been something that's been happening a lot this season. There's only a few scenes where we get to sit in the scene, and so much of it's just these quick little moments. And so she's back in her room, and Rena's like telling Egwene why the Seanchan have come here. And she's telling her, like, the Empress wants to unite every person on this planet under the light. The last battle is coming, and they will only be able to fight it if everyone stands together. Now, I'd have to go back and see if that's how it's kind of presented in the book. I don't remember it necessarily being that way, but I think in some sense, maybe. But this is how it's being portrayed here. But I'm happy that they're reminding the audience that there's an empress, that these people have an empress, because that's very important. For those of you who haven't read these books, you'll get to meet that empress eventually. And so she's telling Egwene this, and how this is, we're doing this for your own good, kind of thing. And Egwene smiles and looks at her and says, I will kill you, just so matter-of-factly. And just Rena gets mad and then storms out. And this is the moment where I was expecting, like, her to say, okay, you're no longer Egwene, you're Tully, which is like kind of what she does in the books. But no, she doesn't do that. So I don't know if they're going to do that at all in this TV show. I don't even know if we're going to see, is it Rhaena, the yellow Aes Sedai, who was collared last episode? Because I don't know if we're going to see her at all. Hopefully we get her in the season finale. And I don't recall what happens to her in the books, to be honest. I can't remember if she gets rescued or not. But in the books, that Yellow Aja was already captured in a Damane and renamed like Pura or something. So I don't know if we're going to revisit her in the season finale. I hope they just don't forget about her and we at least get to see what happens to her. But we'll see. But yeah, I was very surprised that she didn't take Egwene's name away. So because when Egwene tells her she's going to kill her, that would have been the moment in this episode to do that to Egwene. So maybe they're just not going to do it at all. Who knows? Okay, so you may notice I haven't mentioned Nynaeve and Elaine yet, so I want to cover them real quick because we're already an hour and 45 minutes into this. Nynaeve and Egwene are they're dressed as common folk in Falm, and they're roaming around the market. You can tell they're just trying to survive on the street, and they're trying to figure out like what their next move is. And Nynaeve is basically like, she sees a bunch of soldiers marching by, and she's like, okay, let's just go and find Egwene and get her out of there. And Elaine's like, no, we've tried things your way. It hasn't been working for us. We're going to do it my way now. And she's like, you told me that they were traveling with an Ogier, so we need to find him. So, and then we see Loial has been, he's a servant now for Suroth, so he's sent out shopping and things like that. So later they grab him like in the market and pull him off to this side, sort of behind this sort of sheet and stuff. And they're talking to him, and he tells them that where Egwene is being kept, that she's in this one building where all the Damane arts called the kennels. And then, but he has to go, and they tell him to go back, and he's got to get back to Suroth. So you realize that, Nynaeve has that collar and bracelet and stuff that the Rhaema, the Yellow Aja, had. She took that. And then we see them again in the market, and one of the Suldam that I think we've seen earlier is walking down the street. And as she walks by, Nynaeve comes out and sort of tugs on her sleeve, and the woman turns around, and Nynaeve shows that Nynaeve's wearing one of the Suldam bracelets. She goes, it fits. You see, it fits me too. And then puts the collar on the woman. And so then Elaine just clocks the Suldam and knocks her out. So they collared one of the Suldam, one of the Shanchan. And they're going to use her to, obviously it implies they're going to use her to get into that building. Because Loial told them only Suldam are allowed in and out of the building where the Damane are kept. So they've captured themselves a Suldam, and Nynaeve is going to pass herself off as a Suldam, and with this Suldam to be her Damane to get in the building. That's the plan, which, again, they're generally getting their book plot. So Nynaeve, Egwene, Elaine, I recognize their story in the books here in the TV show. They're probably just about the only ones getting their book plot in this TV show at this point for this season. So it's nice that we're at least getting that. And it does show that this show could be giving all of these characters their book plots if they wanted. So that a lot of these changes that this show is making is these are deliberate story choice changes that it's going to be a while before there's any payoff to show why they've thrown so much of these in other character stories and out the window and have just made up these other stories for them at this point in the show. So I suspect maybe they're trying to do a shortcut themselves to get to parts of their actual book stuff that's coming later, and this is just their shortcut to try to just throw in a couple of things that they can then say as, oh, see, all that was set up, you see, for this. Well, everything that happens to them in the books is set up for that in the books as well, but we'll see. We'll see. I'd like to hope that these changes have a purpose, and that the purpose isn't a crappy one. Because we all know what happened when the Game of Thrones showrunners went off book and then moved past having a book. It didn't go well. So, and the worst parts of this TV show are the parts where they keep making things up. And the best parts of this TV show mostly are the parts that are actually from the book. But though there are a couple of made-up things that I think they're doing quite well, like Liandrin in particular. So, and which I guess brings me to Liandrin and what she's doing this episode, because she's there as well in Carian, and she pays House Damodred a visit. And she comes in, and she's sitting with Lady Anver and Anver's son Barthanes. And they're just doing casual small talk. And Liandrin's like, all right, I've had enough of this. Let's get down to business. And Barthanes looks uncomfortable, and he tells his mother, basically, get lost, take a hike. This is royal business here. And so he kicks his mother out of the room. And we see sort of a personality change here. So this is what I was waiting to see, because up to this point, they've presented Barthanes as this nice guy, but which is a very different Barthanes than in the book. And here we're starting to see, oh, okay, they are kind of going this route with the character in the TV show. And you realize that Barthanes is a dark friend, because Leandrin's like, I'm here with orders for you. And he's like, oh, what does our master want? And she's like, looks up at this painting of Moiraine, and she's like, you have to basically take her off the board, kill your aunt. She's to die tonight. And he protests at first, but she's like, are you going to go against your master's orders, kind of thing. And he's like sort of coddled. And then she stands up to leave, and she's like, and if your mother gets in the way, causes any trouble, take her out too. And then she walks out. And then you see that Anver had heard this. She was listening through this sort of pipe system she has where she can hear what goes on in her house. And just rather than coming back to it later, Barthanes, we see him after this. He's walking down the hall somewhere in Damodred House with one of the servants of the household. And they stop at a door, and Barthanes is like, is this my aunt's room? And the servant's like, yes, do you want me to open the door? And he's like, no, I'll take care of it. And Barthanes goes into the room, and he's looking around, it's empty. And then he sees his mother standing at the doorway and realizes he's been caught. And she slams the door and locks him in there. And she basically tells him, it's like, I can't believe you would betray the family. And he's telling her, it's like, Moiraine never cared about you or me or anything. So why are you protecting her? Why are you siding with her? And Anver tells him there are two things Moiraine understands better than he does. And she says, the difference between what is right and what is wrong, and how much harder it is sometimes to do what is right. And he's like, please, mother, you can't tell anybody. You can't tell the queen. You can't tell anybody. And she's like, too late, I already did. And you see the royal Carian guard coming up, basically to take him, implying they're going to take him away. So I suspect Barthanes' fate by the end of this TV season is going to be very similar to his fate in the book. So, which is not surprising at all. I thought for a moment they weren't going to go there with this character, but this episode reveals no, he is actually a dark friend, and it's not going to go well for him. I'll just say that. So we have Rand, again, has been locked up now. He's being kept in a room, guarded by Leanne Sedai. He's shielded still. They've kept a shield on him. And we see Rand, he's like suddenly standing like outside where we saw him in the previous episode when he was like tied to the wheel. He's in Telerian Rod. Lanfear's brought him there. And she's there on her little throne again. And he's telling her, she's disappointed. How did you let yourself be shielded so easy? Like, how disappointed she is in him. And he's asking her for her help. Because he knows it's like, it's like, Ishamael and Lanfear want me to go to Falm. They want me to be declared the dragon. So I know going there plays into their hands, but he's going to go anyway because he wants to help rescue Egwene. And he basically tells Lanfear, look, you don't want what they're doing to me to happen, then break me out, rescue me. So suddenly Lanfear is walking through the foregate, and she's just flinging with ease. She's just making things explode around her, just kind of casually strolling through the foregate, just causing chaos and mayhem and death and destruction as she's strolling by. And Lan goes to the sanitarium where Rand had been working earlier in the season, and Alana and her warders are there guarding the door to the garden where Logain is kept, and they basically let Lan go in there. And Lan goes in to see Logain because Lan had a conversation with Moiraine earlier in the season once they were reunited. And he's asking her, it's like, have you had urges to basically self-delete, if you will? because that seems to be common when an Aes Sedai is stilled and permanently cut off from the source. They generally lose all will to live, and a lot of them basically end it. And he wants to know if she's been feeling this way. And she's like, absolutely not. Like, Rand is the dragon. He's too important. If for no other reason, I have to stay alive to protect this kid and get him ready. And Land's like nodding, like, thought so. So you realize Land is like trying to put two and two together. Now, this is where you get into some stuff that just seems silly to me. Land goes to visit Logain, and he wants to know, what did Logain see when Logain looked at Moiraine? Because apparently they know Logain can see weaves and the one power around people and stuff. And he wants to know what he saw when he looked at Moiraine. And Logain eventually tells him, and he says he sees 1,000 strands held in place, tied off, but nothing, like no channeling keeping them there. They're somehow there on their own. And they're put there by a man. And that's when Lan realizes that Moiraine was shielded instead of stilled. Now, why Lan would even think of any of this stuff, who knows? But so he realizes this, and they realize, okay, we got to get back to Moiraine. We got to find a way to unshield her. So they're going back. Moiraine, Alana comes in. She said, there's fires everywhere. Something's happening. You can hear mayhem and noise. And again, it's Lanfear. We see Lanfear, again, strolling through, and she's just like bursting through the sort of castle door and all this stuff. And she's just having her way. She's going in there to break Rand out, because that's what Rand asked her to do. But we have Moiraine comes to visit Rand. And Rand is, again, still on his knees, still shielded. This man's been on his knees the entire episode since the Amyrlin shielded him in the scene where they talk to each other. And she's kind of quietly talking to him with Leanne just outside the room watching. And then Verin shows up. And Verin basically tells Leanne that Leanne's needed to help the Amyrlin, and that Verin is to take over the shield, the weave for the shield, and that's an order. So Leanne leaves, and passes the shield to Verin and leaves. And once Leanne's gone, Verin lets the shield go. And Moiraine realizes, how Verin worded things to not lie, because she just let Leanne just assume the Amyrlin sent her there. So now part of the question here becomes two questions. Who sent Liandrin to Barthanes with orders to kill Moiraine? Because Liandrin is kind of working for Lanfear. You get the impression Barthanes is working for Ishamael. So did Lanfear send Liandrin to tell Barthanes to kill Moiraine because Lanfear just wants Moiraine out of the way, and she just doesn't want to get her own hands dirty or whatever. She doesn't want Rand, I guess, maybe to know. Who knows? So, but because is Liandrin just doing this on her own just because she hates Moiraine, or is Liandrin doing this knowing it'll fail so Lanfear can take one of Ishamael's chess pieces off the board, which is Barthanes. Barthanes is Ishamael's man in Carian. So, and the Forsaken are always messing with each other. So is this Lanfear's play to get Barthanes off the board and just like give Ishamael a dig, as they like to do to each other? So, and it also makes you wonder, well, I don't want to spoil things for people who haven't read this books. So I'm going to put this little book spoilers ticker up here. So the way they're doing this in the TV show, is Verin doing this on her own? Because, she knows who Rand is and wants to help and believes Moiraine's doing the right thing? Or was Verin sent there by somebody to help free Rand? So, and again, I'm trying to, I don't want to give too many big spoilers away for people, even for people who are now reading these books but haven't gotten deep into them yet. Let's just say people are doing things and start thinking about why they do some of the things they do and whether or not it's their own choice or their own motivations or whether there's something else in play for why some people do some of the things they do. So that is very subtly here in this season and in this episode. That's one of the good things in this episode. There are a few things that kind of make you think about like what's really in play and who's doing what for whom and in whose orders and who's trying to outmaneuver who, and just something to think about for people watching this TV show. So I'm trying to give hints to things but not spoil things outright. But let's just say, you know, sometimes there's a lot more happening than you realize. But anyway, so Varen is like, we're going to get this kid out of here. You know, Varen's like, I have an Ogier map of the city. There's a way gate here in the city, close by. We can all get the Falm through there. So they're all heading out. The Amyrlin is now up on top on the ramparts. A bunch of Aes Sedai with her. They're all channeling together, trying to put out all these fires that Lanfear has set everywhere. And Leanne shows up. And the Amyrlin's like, what the hell are you doing here? And Leanne's like, you sent for me. And that's when the Amyrlin realizes what happened. And she's like, okay, you take over for me here, and you and the sisters go out and start healing people who need it. And the Amyrlin knows that Rand is being broken out of jail in a sense, and is going to go off and try to stop it. And Varen and her water are going to lead him to the Waygate. And Varen knows that Moiraine tells Varen that she's taking Rand to Falm. That's where they need to go. And Varen realizes she means for Rand to declare himself at Tommen's Head, because he'll declare himself in the banner of fire across the sky kind of stuff. She starts repeating some of the dragon prophecies. So, and again, reminding you that Varen is aware of all this stuff as a Brown Asha. She knows all these prophecies. She studied them for a long time. And then Alana and her water Maxim and Lan arrive, and you realize, okay, they're all on the same page now. After spending most of the season, like thinking the other's a bad person, trying to not let each other know what they're doing, they're all finally synced up. So Alana and her water, Varen and her water, they know what Moiraine is doing, they know who Rand is, and they're pretty much all on board at this point. And Alana's like, she looks at Rand and she says, I hope you're worth this, boy. And they go off, to basically help people in the city as well. So we have Lan, Moiraine, and Rand now set out. Varen has shown them where the Waygate is so they can get there. They don't need her now. And they're on their way, trying to go to the Waygate to get out of there. So we now get to the finale of the episode. Rand, Lan, and Moiraine, they're at the Waygate, and Moiraine is telling Rand, okay, open the Waygate. You can wield the one power. And Lan tells Rand, no. He wants Rand to use the power to look at Moiraine, to see if Rand can see those weaves. And Rand does, and he sees, and he's like, yes, there's a bunch of weaves tied off into a shield. And this is when Moiraine realizes that she's been shielded instead of stilled. And apparently in this TV show, the ability to tie off a weave and leave it without having to constantly channel a shield is apparently an old power that everyone's forgotten how to do, which is not the case in the books. There are some people who know how to tie shields, weaves off in the books, from what I remember. Not necessarily a common thing a lot of people can do, but it's not something that was thought lost forever, as far as I can remember. But so Rand starts channeling almost like a little blade of power, because there's not enough time, nor is Rand skilled enough to delicately unravel it. So he just slices through it, and all of the one power like comes back to Moiraine. She can feel the source again. It's almost like a moment of ecstasy. And then she starts channeling now and opening the Waygate, and this is when the Amyrlin arrives. And the Amyrlin like uses the one power. She knocks Rand down. She flings Lan across the yard, and she shields Rand one more time again. And she's commanding Moiraine to close the Waygate, because you know, TV show Siuan Sanche is like Elida Sedai at this point. Like I mentioned earlier, she wants to lock Rand up and just keep him caged, which is nothing like Siuan in the book. And she's like telling Moiraine, you have to stop, close the Waygate. And Moraine's like, I can't. This needs to be done. And then Siuan invokes the oaths. You swore to me on the oath rod. You have to do this. I command you. And the oaths kick in, and Moiraine is forced against her will to close the Waygate. So now Siuan Sanche commits what's basically a crime here, an act of evil. She uses a compulsion weave, in a sense, in a roundabout way, to make Moiraine her puppet. And if there had been any witnesses to that, Siuan would have been immediately shielded, taken back, put on trial, found guilty, stilled, deposed, thrown out. Because that's about as big a crime as an Aes Sedai can commit, without straight up just cold-blooded murdering somebody. And I was watching this moment in absolute shock, because this is so far away from who Siuan Sanche is in the books. This is not completely unrecognizable character now in the TV show here. I couldn't believe that they had her do this in this episode. Like, and this is the stuff that drives me crazy about this TV show. They have other scenes that are really good. And then they do this, where they take a character and they just destroy them. And they just throw the character in the garbage and just change them into a completely different person, because this is just what they want the plot to be. So rather than writing something that can happen organically in a way that stays true to the story, stays true to the characters in the story, they just rip Siuan's entire character and throw it away, and just replace her with this completely different Siuan Sanche. And man, I was furious watching this scene. Again, as someone who's read these books, especially these early books, so many times at this point, I was just absolutely I could not believe what I was watching. Now, I'm not someone who normally gets angry at an adaptation or a show, but that made me angry, because that's just the complete assassination of a character who's just a really, really great and interesting character throughout this book series. Like, what have they done, and why? Like, what in the world? And it makes me think that they're doing this to just make her this thing that, instead of laying the groundwork properly for what's going to happen in the book, again, trying not to spoil things for people who haven't read these books, but there's a tectonic shift coming in the White Tower. And this show apparently has decided to make Siuan a completely different person, to have her act completely differently in a really horrific way, I'm assuming to set up what's coming, and rather than doing it properly. Because, you know what? Quite frankly, this Amyrlin Seat here in this TV show, she's a piece of shit. So I don't really give a crap what happens to this Siuan Sanche in the TV show. I mean, she just basically committed an act of evil. So why would I care what happens to this woman at any point going forward in this TV show? She just revealed herself as the evilest person in this show at this point. Right up there with one of the Forsaken. She's doing Forsaken-esque things here. And I can't wrap my head around how and why they would do this to this character. Because again, Siuan Sanche is nothing even remotely like this in these books at all. So at this point, Lanfear strolls in. And Lanfear just so casually, she just takes the Amyrlin and just flings her with power, and it kind of looks like they almost give you the impression that like the Amyrlin's back is broken or something, because she's lying there. She can't really even move at this point. And Lanfear just like click, and the way gates instantly open. And one of the things I liked in this episode is you're finally seeing the power difference, just how strong a Forsaken actually is when they want to be. Because there's been a few times now, we've seen Moiraine like struggling, trying to force a waygate open. And Lanfear's just like, yeah, huh. And it's open. Because that's how a Forsaken should be. They're that powerful. Where Lanfear can walk into that city and just murder everyone if she really wanted to do that. And murder everyone pretty easily if she really desired it. It's just not how they operate. Lanfear especially rarely just operates full-blown out in the open like this. So this is a bit out of character for Lanfear in some ways, because she's much more subtle and manipulative than she is just brazen. But, it makes for great TV, and in the context of the Lanfear in this TV show, they need a spectacle to set up the finale. And this is their spectacle here. This sort of Lanfear just strolling in and just like wrecking shop everywhere with ease, which is the interesting part. And Lanfear goes to kill Moiraine, and like telling Rand, it's like, I told you I'd kill her if I ever saw her with you again. And Rand like jumps in front of Moiraine to protect her, and he's like, no, like, you want my help? You don't touch her. And Lanfear's like, okay, kind of thing. And Lanfear's like, all right, let's go. Grabs a torch. She lights the torch with her power, and she's like waiting for them. Come on. And she steps into the waygate. And Rand goes in, Lan goes in, and Moiraine like is looking back at like Swan. Swan's still lying there like immobile. And again, they do sort of give you the impression that her back is broken. So we'll see where that goes next episode in the finale.
I don't know that.
Okay. And they have this weird look where it's like on Moraine's face, it's part heartbroken, part like hardened. And I couldn't quite catch it, but it almost looks like Swan almost half smiles and like as a goodbye. And this, I guess, is implying that this is the end of their relationship, which I kind of think it is, like you're in a relationship with someone and they basically commit like one of the deadly sins or something against you personally, you'd kind of like be, okay, I'm out of here. Thank you. Bye-bye now. So they kind of gave it the impression that, because they started flashing back to the flashback of them, being younger and together and being happy and in love, interspersed with them looking at each other here. They kind of like spliced these two moments together to show you the beginning of their love and now the end of their love. That's kind of the way the show presented it. So we'll see where this goes from there. But yeah, I just absolutely hated what they did to Siuan Sanche, just personality-wise. I mean, what they, like, having her be attacked and almost killed here is a separate thing. But just the way she acted it's not Siuan Sanche at all. So, very disappointed. But that's how the episode ends. So, now, I do want to talk about this Carian Waygate real quick here before, we move off of this specific episode. In the book, Rand is in Carian. He's with Logain. He's with Hurin. I mean, not Logain, Loial, the Ogier. And Hurin, the Sniffer, who's the Sniffer in the books. And he runs into Tom Merrilin. So Tom Merrilin's there now as well. And Verin and Perrin and Mat and Ingtar and them finally show up in Carian. Because they had, through events, they'd gotten ahead of them. And Rand and Loial go and check out the Waygate, because they're going to use this Waygate to go to Falme, because Padan Fain has murdered more people, stolen the horn back and everything, because Rand had stolen the horn from Padan Fain in the book, and Padan Fain steals it back here in the city of Carian. and leaves another message to come to Tommen's Head, come like basically to Falm. And so they go to check out the Waygate. And when they open the Waygate, Machin Shin, that like crazy psychotic killing wind, is right there. It's like guarding the gate, and the gate's unusable, and they shut it right away. So in the book, they have to flee Carian, because Carian is just going to hell. Like civil war is basically breaking out because all sorts of craziness happened. And there's Murderol, there's Trollocs outside waiting to kill them all, and so they basically make a run for it, and because there's an Ogier steading nearby. And the steading is this sort of place the Ogier live. And they're these special, like, land where the one power isn't touchable inside an Ogier steading. So Aes Sedai never go there, because anyone who can channel doesn't want to go into a steading and be cut off from the source while they're there. And Dark Friends won't enter it either. Any servants of the Dark won't enter a steading. So it's a safe haven for them if they can get to it in time. So they basically leave Carian, run to the steading, because there's another Waygate there that they're going to try to use to go to Falm. When they get there, they do all their hellos and everything. You see a bunch of Ogier. They go to that Waygate, try to open that, and that Machin Shin is guarding that one as well. And that's when they realize there's a portal stone, and they're going to have to try to use the portal stone, and use the portal stone to transport them to Falm. And Rand had encountered a portal stone in the book earlier, because in the book, Rand is with Perrin and Mat and all of them on the hunt for the horn. And when they bed down for the night on the road, Rand falls asleep by this weird-looking stone. Loial beds down there, and Huron, the tracker, beds down there. And when they wake up in the morning, everyone else is gone. And they realize eventually that it was a portal stone, and it transported them to this sort of mirror dimension. It's sort of a mirror copy, almost like an alternate version of the world. And that's where he meets Lady Selene in that mirror world. And they find another portal stone and eventually come back to the proper world. And when they do, they found their way ahead of everybody. They've jumped at a big distance, and Padan Fain is behind them now. And Perrin and Ingtar and all them are behind even him. And that's how they end up sneaking up to Padan Fain, because they don't expect them to come from that direction, steal the horn and the dagger, and run to the city of Carian to hide there, basically knowing that Perrin and Mat and Ingtar and them will show up, and which is what they eventually do in the book. But they set up these portal stones earlier in the book so that then they can use the portal stone here to get to Falm. And it's when Rand basically channels the portal stone, and they all pass through that and are taken to Falm. And this is when we get this flicker, 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 flicker moment in book 2, where Rand sees all like 1,000 versions of how his life plays out, all these different ways it goes, and all the things that happen to him. And there are some repeating things in each and every one of them. Like, he pretty much dies in all of them, for the most part, in all these different ways. And when they finally come out of the portal stone by Falm, it's months later, and he realizes everyone saw like thousands of versions of their own lives play out in front of their eyes in an instant. So I don't know if we're going to get that in this TV show. Now, I'm hoping that we're going to get a scene in the Waygate at the start of episode 8, where it's going to be a version of that flicker, flicker, flicker thing, because that's, again, this is one of these iconic scenes in this book that all the book readers were all waiting for. We wanted to see Mat with his quarterstaff fighting Gowan and Galan in book 3. We expected that in this season. We wanted to see the guitars for telling the dragon being born. We got that here in the crappy version of it. We wanted to see Rand meeting the Amyrlin. We got that here, a crappy version of it. We want flicker, 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 flicker is one of the other scenes. So there's no portal stones in this TV show so far. So I don't know if we're going to get... I cannot imagine. Because there is no way, if a book reader working on that show, when they're sitting down in the writer's room, okay, what are the big beats we need to hit for season 2? Flicker, 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 flicker is coming out of somebody's mouth in that room in the first 5 seconds of that conversation. So I hope that it's going to show up in this TV show. And we're at the point where if it's going to show up before the finale happens, it has to happen here, like at the beginning of this season finale next week. Remy D, I need to get back to the book. Stopped at book 10 or 11 and forgot. Oh, man. The last 4 books of The Wheel of Time in particular are just exceptional. Just outstanding. Robert Jordan's final book that he wrote himself before he passed, and then the 3 books Sanderson writes at the end are just exceptional storytelling. You stopped right when you get the whole final act begins. So I hope, Remy, that you do get back to it and continue on, because this is a story that sticks its landing in the books, and I was very, very happy with how it ended. Okay, Matt Jacobson. I'm worried that we won't even get traveling or skimming. Lanfear, for some reason, needed to steal a horse to chase Rand and Moiraine when she ought to have been able to travel. Yes, that really surprised me as well, that she would need to ride a horse to go after them. So, that was unexpected, because she doesn't need to do that. And then this is another kind of weird thing about this TV show is we see her needing a horse to chase after Moiraine and Rand earlier in the season, and then yet somehow she's snaps her fingers and she's got Matt all the way in Falm already. So they didn't bother to show us how they got there so quickly. So to me, that seemed to have implied traveling, that she kind of took a hold of an unconscious Matt and traveled with him and brought him right to a Falm. But who knows? We'll see. I hope it's in there, because traveling and skimming, they're both really important kind of tools that Rand in particular, once he learns how to use it, really puts it to good use. And it's another one of those things that separate different people, different power levels. Because, everyone else, they have to find these wake gates, portal stones to try to get places. And then people who can travel can just, I'm just going to let me open this, step through, and I'm on the other side of the planet kind of thing if they want. So it's, I imagine if we're going to get it, it might just come later, because as something Rand can sort of level up to. I think Rand just kind of figures out how to do it. But I think he sees one of the Forsaken do it, and he kind of gets an idea for it. And he does it just instinctively to save Avienda, I think, in, I don't know if it's the 3rd or 4th book, or 5th book even. There's that scene where he just instinctively travels with her, and they end up, who knows where the hell they are. With Sanche, I don't know if they're on the other continent for a moment before they travel back, because there's snow and all these other people. They're in a completely different place, so I'm hoping that does come in this TV show, because it's an important plot part. It's an important tool that's used by the people who do figure it out, and used very effectively. And it does separate people in terms of ability and skill, and what some people can accomplish quickly and what others toil at trying to get done. So we'll see. I'm really worried that this show is discarding most of book 3, and I have this fear that they're going to treat Rand's reveal at Tommen's Head here in Falm as a combination of his reveal there and his reveal to the whole world that happens at the Stone of Tyr later. I'm worried that they're just going to say, this is just going to be that. I'm starting to worry that we're just not going to have Tyr. That's not going to happen, because they're running out of room to do it. It makes sense if they have Rand next season go into the Threefold Land, deal with the whole Karakarn and Rudian and all that stuff, and then maybe come back out of the Threefold Land with Aiel and go to the Stone of Tyr after. I could see the TV show doing that, just moving the Stone of Tyr till after he goes to the desert and comes back. So maybe they're going to do it that, and then just have the Stone of Tyr. Because the Stone of Tyr, for those who may not be aware, you've heard mentions of Arthur Hawkwing, like I talked about him earlier. And the Shan-Chan are an empire founded by one or two of Arthur's sons who sailed across to the other side of the world. And Arthur was like this world's sort of historical King Arthur in a sense. And the Stone of Tyr has this is it Caladan, I think, the sword that isn't a sword. It's this sort of sword made out of fire or power, and that it's impossible for anyone to take. And it's very much Arthurian sword in the stone kind of stuff. And there's a lot of Arthurian like influence in this story, in this whole Wheel of Time world throughout this whole series. So I'm hoping that we're going to eventually get that. And yeah, Matt says maybe they'll postpone the Stone of Tyr until Kalendor, which is that sword, is needed. Because this is one of the things in the early books. He does go and he takes Kalendor as part of one of the big, so that everyone, the whole like world kind of knows, oh, this really is the dragon now. And then he shoves the sword that isn't a sword like into the floor, just as a reminder to everyone that I rule Tyr. I'm its lord. This is my tower. This is my city. And all of you lords that I'm leaving here, you work for me. And this sword stuck in the floor here is your reminder of who your boss is. And then he leaves it there, and he doesn't come back and get it until much, much later. So maybe, yeah, they're just going to save it. From my perspective, I'm just thinking of the Stone of Tyr itself and how the stone being taken, which is the place that can't be taken, is taken by the dragon. And that's the act that the rest of the continent kind of realizes that, oh, this is the dragon. This is the real dragon, not a false dragon. The reveal at Falm is big for everyone in that part of the continent, but it's the taking of Tyr, I think, is the big, like, that lets everyone else know that the actual dragon has come. And I'm just curious to see. I'm wondering if they're just going to just have Falm just be all that. And then maybe Kalendor will just show up later in the story and not necessarily even at the Stone of Tyr. It just might be somewhere else. Who the hell knows? I'm really hoping we get the Red Door to Terangriel. I'm a little worried that Matt and his tea is meant to somehow kind of start taking the place of that. I hope not, because that's a book 4 scene that's early in book 4. Because there's this red door frame that Matt goes through in the book, and he meets these really strange people and sees all this crazy stuff, and kind of makes a deal with them to get the hell back out of there. Rand goes in that door frame separately, and Rand experiences stuff. We don't see what Rand sees though, and Moiraine went through the door frame on her own as well, and none of the 3 knew any of the others had gone through this, and none of them encounter each other, and they all experience different things in that doorframe. But we only see what Matt experienced, because we just see Rand stumbling out of the doorframe, and then Moiraine stumbling out of the doorframe, but we never see what they specifically saw. But you just see in their characters and things that they say and how they act later that kind of give you hints at some of the things that they might have seen. I'm really hoping that happens. And if the Stone of Tyr is dropped or moved to much, much later, that red door frame, I hope, shows up somewhere else. Or they maybe just come up with a different way to give them that experience, which I'm really hoping not. There's that other door frame in Rudian, that Matt goes in as well. I'm wondering if Matt does get a door frame thing, that they're just going to combine those 2 scenes for Matt. And maybe that's all going to happen in Rudian next season. So, it's so hard to try to predict what the hell this show is going to do with any of these characters. And any of these, and these are significant moments for these story moments in general, and just critical character moments in these books. And the show hasn't handled some of these very well at all so far. Like I said, Nynaeve, Egwene, and Elaine, they're doing a good job with them. Like, they're getting their book story. I generally recognize that they're doing what they do in the books. Simple, pared down version because, there's only so much real estate. Each one of them can get only so much minutes on screen they each get. But again, they're generally getting what they're supposed to be doing here. Very few of these other characters, however, are. And that's just a very frustrating experience. Now, I know that there are a lot of people watching this who never read these books, and they're enjoying the hell out of this TV show because it might be a good fantasy show on its own if it wasn't like attached to a known story. Like, if this was just something I was watching, it would be probably a much more interesting show. I'd still have some problems with some of the storytelling choices and some of the writing and just some of what these characters are doing. Sometimes just doesn't really make much sense. But it is kind of weird when you spend all this money for the rights to adapt such a well-beloved story that comes with a big built-in audience, and then show not any real interest in that audience when you make your adaptation. This seems to be, the audience in mind seems to be people who don't know these books at all. That seems to be who their primary viewer that they're aiming for is. Because they certainly aren't doing much outside of a few little things here and there that show they have any real interest in what the book readers think all that much. At least story-wise, they show so little interest in the actual plot sometimes. It doesn't come across as though they have any interest in what the people who already know the story think of it, which is very, very, very strange. But like I said, my sister loves this TV show. She's never read these books, and she's just a fan of science fiction and fantasy. She's having a great time watching this. And to anyone enjoying this, even book readers who are enjoying this, I mean, I don't begrudge anyone in having a good time watching the show. I don't begrudge anyone who likes the changes they're making even. Art is such a subjective thing. I'm not going to tell anyone, you're not allowed to like this. I think a lot of it's crap, personally, but again, that's my personal interpretation of it. I mean, I'm not going to, I think you're wrong. If you've read these books and you think they're doing a good job, overall, I think you're wrong, but I'm not going to tell you can't have that opinion. So, but anyway, yeah, and Brandon Sanderson and Harriet McDougall are supposedly consultants. That's what I wonder about. I kind of get the feeling that they were gave initial input at the very beginning development stages, but I haven't seen much that indicates that they're hands-on people at all at this point. Because from what I remember, I can't remember what it was, but there was something specific that they were going to do in season 1. And when Sanderson looked at all the changes they were going to make, he pointed to one and said, absolutely don't do this. And that's one of the ones that they decided to do. So however much influence or consulting input they might have seems to be very, very, very minimal. So I'm wondering if it was just they were paid some money to just be initial consultants, just so the show could kind of claim that, oh yeah, they've signed off, they're good, and they're not really to a degree. I don't know, all that stuff behind the scenes. Who knows if that's something that we're ever going to know, and if that's something that is even any of our business. I don't know that aspect of it, of how much right a fan has to the behind-the-scenes working of a show. That's just that business stuff that goes on that's independent of the story. But, if they are name-dropping people, to get people to watch, then the name-dropping should be accurate. So, I get from that point. Yeah, if these people are involved, they should hopefully be involved the way the show says they're involved. So is it me or the special effects they have the weaves just look really amateurish? Yeah, this is one of the things I think they're still figuring out. They've changed the weaves a bit in this season from the first season. They're adding a bit more color to them. But I think it's something there's still work that they could do to really get these weaves to stand out more. So, and it's not an easy thing to portray on screen, especially if you're talking different kinds of weaves. And showing the different power levels of people who do make weaves and the complexity or simplicity of weaves. You know, they haven't really gotten into showing that visually all that much. You know, very, very little of that. But we'll see. I don't know where their budget goes and how much of the budget goes on that kind of special effects stuff. But even here, I didn't see much when Rand started channeling in front of the Amyrlin. I'd have to go back and rewatch. It seems to be inconsistent with whether or not the inky oily blackness of the sort of poisonous like coating from the Dark One that sort of surrounds Sidon. There seemed to be some inconsistency with whether that shows up when Rand channels. So it's another thing. This show is still feeling its way when it comes to the weaves and how to present them. And personally, I think they've done a better job showing the Aes Sedai channeling in this season than they did in season 1. I did not like the just excessively grand body gestures from Moiraine and Alana in season 1. You know, when they're channeling like this like wild, crazy conductor conducting a symphony. You know, instead of that I don't recall that being like that in the books. I don't even necessarily like Egwene can just kind of stand there and channel, but Egwene is also a bit more advanced than people. But you know, even Moiraine, she was like doing this like sweeping, like over exaggerated stuff in that like opening, the original, like the pilot episode. And Alana was doing that when like Loghain's men were attacking to try to rescue him. Alana was doing this like super exaggerated movements, and in that I did not like at all, because the Aes Sedai should, I think, to me, should be a bit more subtle and sort of like staid, if you will. I don't know if that's the right word. Sort of composed. The Aes Sedai try to not act ruffled ever if they can get away with it. So I think they're still feeling their way and finding their way when it comes to the body language of an Aes Sedai and the visual effects of the weaves. So I think it's something they're probably going to continue to tinker with as this seasons get deeper into it. And hopefully they'll find something that clicks on both sides of the equation here, both the physicality and the look. So we'll see. I do think that the Forsaken weaves should have some sort of visual distinction to show the like really significantly heightened complexity and power of them. You know, I'd have to go back and look at how they show Lanfear's weaves compared to the Amyrlin's or Rand's and stuff. But yeah, so a lot of that stuff is a kind of learn as you go, especially with TV shows, and they're trying to like they have these limited production windows to work with sometimes, especially when things like the pandemic hit that really train wrecked parts of their season 1 production. But yeah, so I did like Lanfear's powers on screen. Yeah, so it was good, like I said, seeing the different power levels. And I'd have to go back and just pay attention to the specific special effects of her powers, but I did like the, in general, nothing like looked off to me when I was watching the scene, because I've watched the episode twice now. And I do like the calm casualness of her. She just did a very, like, she might as well just like been choosing like a sandwich from the menu, the way she was just doing what she was doing, which works for her character and the way they're presenting her on the TV show. And I am curious to see how the hell they're going to do the season finale. One thing I forgot to mention that was just dumb was when Lan is preparing Rand to meet the Amyrlin in the TV show. He like has this sort of like long sort of coat draped on the chair, and he picks it up, And he goes, here, put this on. Give me your sword. And Rand does this sort of little spin move and comes away with the sword like off of his back, still sheathed though. And let me. Rand says a specific thing. Let me find it here in my notes, because it just made me laugh. Like, is this seriously how they're trying to pass off Rand somehow knowing sword forms? Let's see. I forgot to mention this little part earlier. Come on. And it's probably way at the top of my notes, most likely. Let's see. Come on. All the way back. So when Rand does this move, like, no, you're not taking my sword, and he just kind of spins around, and he's got the thing in his hand, Land goes, Heron dips the wing. You've been learning sword forms. So it's like, this show is actually going to try to pass this off as though the patient that he was helping, Errol, in the sanitarium, the dude with the cane, who's like, Heron dips the wing, and he just does this with his cane. This show is actually daring to try to pass off that Rand al'Thor has somehow learned how to be a blade master by watching some old guy barely be able to swing a little cane and naming sword forms. Like, Rand's somehow going to learn those sword forms in a realistic fighting ability way by watching this guy who can barely walk just kind of, it's like, because this show has cut out all of the scenes that the book tells you, shows you, and hints that Rand and Lan are incessantly training every chance they get when they're together in the books. And apparently this TV show is, oh no, all you had to do is just talk to some old dude in a nursing home, and suddenly you can just hear him talk about it, and you can just be a blade master. And we saw this stupidity in the earlier episode where he goes to Logain, to please teach me how to channel. And all Logain does is, okay, touch the one source, touch the one power. And Rand touches the one power. Now touch it more. And Rand starts channeling more. And it's like, dude, I could have told the kid how to do that. And I mean, some bum, like on the street and for the four-gate bumming for change, could have said, touch the one power. There, now you're a channel master. Just wiggle your arm. Now you're a blade master. It's like this is the stuff about the show that drives me crazy. Like, there's no way Rand al'Thor in this TV show knows what to do with that sword. No, it doesn't. Like, him just doing a little spin, which is not in any way, shape, or form Heron dips the wing or anything at all. Like, what is, are they really expecting me to believe that this kid is going to stroll into that courtyard in Falm and sword fight High Lord Torok? I mean, I'm expecting at this point that he's going to try, and then Lan's going to have to jump in, and maybe they're going to have Lan fight Torok. That would be what I'm expecting, because there's no way in hell Rand would get his head chopped off in 2 seconds trying to go up against Torok. This Rand in the TV show, because he hasn't spent even a minute training with this sword. We've never seen this kid train with this sword. He hasn't even killed anybody with this sword, I don't think, this season. He killed one Fade with the one power. So Moiraine has more kills with a blade in this TV show than I think Rand does at this point, which is just nutty. So yeah, I just forgot to talk about that earlier. So yeah, I think it's funny, Matt says, I think it's funny how the Seanchan all have American accents. And that's actually generally book accurate. I believe Robert Jordan envisioned the Seanchan as having sort of a Texas drawl, like they sound like they're from Texas in the book. That's how Robert Jordan hears the Seanchan when they talk, because they're from the other side of the world. They're going to have a distinctly different accent from everyone else in this continent here. So yeah, so actually it does sound weird because you never expect to hear an American accent, and especially something like science fiction or fantasy. It just sounds so out of place and jarring. But the Sanche actually do have that kind of, like, it's meant to be like a sort of a Texas drawl in the books. So they haven't necessarily gotten the Texas accent right, but they've done an American-esque accent to show that, as a reminder that they're from a faraway place. In the books, we briefly see Rand and Lan actually training, and Lan is putting him through paces and through sword forms. Lan teaches him, I think, specifically to I forget the name of it. I think Matt might have mentioned it earlier in the chat. Sheathing the blade, which is a very dangerous move because you could kill yourself if you do it wrong. But it's where you basically make yourself super vulnerable and you pierce the sword through your own body to kill the enemy, kind of a thing. And this is something that Rand is taught very specifically by Lan, about how dangerous it is, and it's a last resort if it's death or this you have this, but don't ever use it otherwise. So yeah, and there's a scene, I think, when Rand and Lan in the books are up on the ramparts at Faldara training, and this wind comes out of nowhere and tries to like fling like Rand off, or like fling Rand into Lan, and because it's crazy things are starting to happen this close to was it Shaiel Ghul, where the Dark One is imprisoned. More and more weird like power bubbles are starting to pop up, and like weird things are happening in these like bubbles when they burst. And things like this, where you get this wind like that almost attacks Rand, while him and Lan are sword training in the scene in the books. So yeah, we do see them doing this, and Lan has been teaching Rand. And even in the scene where he's preparing Rand to go meet the Amyrlin, in the book, they're in the women's quarters, because this is where the Amyrlin is. She's deep in the women's quarters, so they have to pass all these other women on their way to her rooms. And Rand is just becoming more and more and more wound up tight and more nervous as they're going. And when they're getting close by, just Lan is walking behind him, and Lan goes, "Cat crosses the courtyard." And Rand just instantly, boom, falls right into that, like cat crosses the courtyard, which is the kind of walk that sword blade masters learn, where it's almost a sort of an arrogant saunter. And like your head is like, doesn't move, and your body kind of like swaggers underneath. And it's just a stylized way of walking. And this is how Rand like walks into the room with the Amyrlin as Cat crosses the courtyard. And because Lan has been drilling Rand every opportunity, even though they don't show a lot of it, you understand that off page, off screen, this training is constantly going on. Because Lan doesn't know how much time he's going to have with Rand to get Rand as ready as Rand can be ready for the physical fighting part of being the Dragon Reborn. So that's, again, that cat crosses the courtyard is in the books, it's like boom, and it's just instant, where Rand just instinctively just falls right into that walk, because that's how much Lan has been drilling this stuff into his head. So, and this show, Lan suggests Cat crosses the courtyard here in this scene in this TV show, in this episode, from what I remember. But the show has spent no time building the relationship that Rand and Lan have, because Lan has a lot of sympathy and empathy for Rand, and he knows what the Aes Sedai and how everyone wants to use him. But for him, Rand is an Aielman and a son of Manetheren, and he wants, Manetheren to be done proud by Rand. So it's like honor tells Lan that he has to get Rand ready. Rand has to be able to walk and talk proud and be a son of Manetheren, because there's so few of these people left. These few of Manetheren. Lan is like one of the few of the Malkieri. Even though there's some of them scattered about, there's not many of them. So they carry the burden of the history of their people on them. So Rand has this strong affinity. Lan has this strong affinity to Rand in the books, and really dedicates as much time as he is able to this kid to get him ready. because he wants he wants Rand to survive. He wants Rand to win and succeed, and on his own terms, like he said, on his feet, find his own way forward where he's not just somebody's tool. And Lan just feels it's his responsibility for when it comes to the martial parts of it, to get Rand as ready as possible. And for almost to be, since Tam isn't there, Lan almost takes on a fatherly role in some sense to just teach Rand how to be a man. Because it's time. Your sheep herder days are done. You're the dragon reborn now. It's time for you to be that man that you're born to be. And, Lan wants to be this sort of guide and give him this guidance and teach him how to do this. And so it's a fierce thing for Lan. This is something that drives Lan very deeply in the books. And him and Rand have this unique relationship as a result of it that is different from how Lan interacts with anyone else in this story, really, any of the other men. Their relationship is very different. This is a very interesting and unique and personal relationship because of who Lan is and what his own experiences are. So, and none of that is in this TV show, like none of it. It's completely absent. And another thing, there's just such a disappointment in this show. Such a disappointment. But, at least the girls are getting their characterization. They're beginning to talk to each other and learn each other. And sort of, you see the battle of wills beginning with them. They're getting all those interactions, but it's been just completely absent over here. Like, even Rand and Matt. Rand and Matt spend a lot of time together in these books, particularly in a lot of these books. They're with each other for long stretches here in a lot of parts. And this show has, outside of one scene where they talked for a minute, they've spent no time together in this whole second season. And it's, again, really, really disappointing. So yeah, this is, like I said, since we're almost on the 3-hour mark here, this is a very frustrating experience. Season 2 is definitely a better season overall than season 1, without a doubt. There's a lot of things they've improved on, but it also means when they get it wrong, they get it really, really wrong. And the things that I dislike the season continue to be things I significantly dislike more than the things I disliked in season 1. And man, this was a rough episode for me, just in terms of as someone who's lived with some of these scenes that are in the book for so many years, to wait all decades and decades to see some of these moments, to see Rand meeting with the Amyrlin, and to just get this dumpster fire version that we got in this TV show. It's it's frustrating, but we'll see where it goes. There's things that are going to happen in this finale that, if they do the general book finale, there's going to be some really cool things coming in this final episode. Hey, by the way, do you even remember the Horn of Valere exists in this TV show? The Horn of Valere, which is the driving, like, sort of MacGuffin they've been chasing this whole book, that kind of plays a big role in the book's finale. So this show, I don't know, did they even mention the horn? I can't even remember if they mentioned the horn in this episode, which is really weird if they didn't remember to put it front and center in the audience's mind, because, kind of important coming up next episode. Maybe, I guess we're going to get in a little, they give you those little, like, reminders before the episode starts at the beginning of each episode. We'll probably get reminded of the Horn of Valere there. So, but there's some really, really cool stuff. Do I have faith that this show is going to do any of those things? The Nynaeve, Egwene, and Elaine stuff, yes, I have total faith that stuff's going to happen. Do I have any idea that Rand and his showdown with Ishamael is going to go down in this books the way it does, in this season the way it does in the books? No idea. It's a pretty badass battle. This whole finale of the second book is pretty wild, because everything kind of hits the fan all at once, and they've done a poor job getting all the pieces in place for this finale. So it's a bit of a mess where the way they have things right now, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But yeah, man, Matt's been wasted, Rand's been wasted, Varen's been wasted, Ingtar is non-existent in this season. So many disappointments, so many could have beens, and just one more episode to go. Yeah, so yeah, Matt says Pattern Fane gives Turok the horn. That's all we've seen. Yeah, we saw that earlier in one of the episodes where he presents the horn to him. And from what I remember, I don't remember if they could even open the box. I don't remember if Turok knows how to open that chest where the horn is in the book. I'd have to go back and I'm going to be rereading from chapter 35 through the end of book 2. That's my reading for this coming week in preparation for the season finale. That's going to be airing, I think, late Thursday night. So chapter 35 is when they leave Karian. Matt, Rand, Perrin, Varen, and Ingtar and them, and Loyal, and they run to the Ogier Steading. And then from there, all the way to the finale of the book, I'm going to be rereading that whole last 15 chapters. If again, the second book, The Great Hunt, is a really good book. I enjoy The Eye of the World a lot, but the second book does, the story takes a step up in quality in that second book. So, and it's book 4 is the book where you realize the Wheel of Time is something different and unique. That's, I think, the first realization that this is going to be something special, is that 4th book. I'm personally partial to book 3 is one of my favorites. Book 4, I think, is one of the best early books. Book 3 is a personal favorite of mine. So I'm just super disappointed that so little of book 3 seems like it's going to even take place in this TV show at all. But, we'll see. Like I said, they could be shuffling things out of order, so, like, to their heart's content. They can make anything happen at any point in this entire TV show with the rate they're going. But we'll see. There's a whole hell of a lot to happen in this last episode, and I guess it all depends upon what is actually going to happen and what's not going to happen. So, and where the hell is Min? By the way, where the hell is Min? By the way, Min in the books goes with Egwene and Elaine and Nynaeve with Leandrin, and Min is captured along with Egwene. Now, Min doesn't channel, so she's not a Damane. She's just made a servant. So in this TV show, they made Logain and Ingtar captured, and they made them servants, and Min has been mostly useless this season. But, Min is there, and she's dealing with the Shan-Chen in her own way as a servant. And I understand the show not doing that because this is Egwene's time to shine in the story, in the show, with her being the only one in captivity in this sense. So I totally get that, but, I'm hoping Min shows up because there's a quiet little moment. I'm just going to use this to wrap up here, and I'll talk more about this in next Sunday's review covering the last episode. But there's a quiet little moment between Min and Rand late in book 2, and when Lanfear makes an appearance, and Lanfear, like, Min is cradling Rand in her lap. Rand's like he's not awake, and Egwene sort of pops in, finds them, and Egwene sees them and realizes that Min has feelings for Rand, and Egwene tells Min, it's like, he's not for you. He's the dragon. He's too dangerous. You can never be in a relationship with him. And Min, looks at Egwene and is like, you threw him away. So what do you care if I pick him up? You're the one who threw him out. You discarded him. I can pick him up if I want. And it's like a critical moment for Egwene in this story where she kind of has to grow up in a sense. And it's a quiet little moment. And then Egwene leaves. And then Lanfear pops up, strolls into the room and sees Min. And she goes, I'll let you keep him for now, but I'll let you watch him for me, but he's mine, and you and everyone else needs to understand that, but I'll let you keep watch over him. And then Lanfear leaves. I have a feeling this is just a guess for next week that if we get that scene at all, it's going to be Elaine getting that scene with Rand instead of Min, because there's that one little shot in the preview where it looks like Rand is like looking up and is like saying, "Who are you?" And then there's a separate shot where we see Elaine looking down. And if you put those two next to each other, it does look like this is him meeting Elaine. And I have a feeling that Elaine is going to get that moment with Rand in this TV show instead of Min. And then we might get a Lanfear and Elaine meeting. Very briefly, we might get a Lanfear saying that, what she says to Min in the books, to Elaine. So that's my prediction. That's the only prediction I'm going to make for the season finale as to what's going to happen. Is they're going to take that little moment away from Min and give it to Elaine in the show instead. So, and with that, again, my playlist for all of the episodes, the live streams for all the episodes up to this point, you can find in the show notes down below. I'll be adding this to that playlist either later tonight or tomorrow. And I will see you next Sunday, 7:45 Eastern p.m., to go over the season finale and hope that the season finale was better than this episode, because, again, this was easily the worst episode of the season for me, even though there were some good things that happened. And I'm actually going to remember to get ready to click end stream before I actually say goodnight. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to Matt and Remy, and I think Stan was here earlier. I appreciate every one of you who took the time to watch live and comment here, and to everyone watching this later who, watches this after the fact. Thank you very much, all of you. I don't take anybody's time that they give me for granted at all, and I appreciate each and every one of you coming here and spending some time with me, be it live or after the fact. And I will be talking to you throughout the week, either in my community posts here or on my SirBookSage handle on Twitter. And I'm looking forward to the season finale and to see if they can hopefully have a much better finale than the first season, because that is still, I think, my worst episode of the TV series so far. And on that note, have a wonderful night, have a wonderful Sunday night, and I will talk to you soon.